Chapter 1930. What did you say? When Coterie finished, Kaluan, Will and Jebi all cried out at the same time. The guardian deity is not in the palace but sealing the Beast King in the capital of alternate generations. Father. Jafar couldn't sit still anymore. He stood up abruptly and stared at Gouda, who was silent and had a dark look on his face. Is the guardian really not in the palace? Gouda didn't say a word. His silence was equivalent to a tacit acknowledgement of the accuracy of Coterie's information, which made the faces of the Baruba Empire's upper echelons turn pale. The Baruba Empire's demigod guardian wasn't in the palace, but the enemy had a Beast King. Although it was only a pseudo-demigod, it wasn't something a Class 9 powerhouse could compare to. It was said that the strong reigned supreme in the Spalier world. A Rank 7 powerhouse could stop an army of 10,000 Rank 5 powerhouses. If it was a pseudo-demigod, it could easily wipe out 10,000 Rank 8 powerhouses. Of course, if it was a Rank 9 powerhouse, they wouldn't need to mobilize so many people to stop a pseudo-demigod. But were Rank 9 powerhouses so common? Even if Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Meijio, Origami, and Yoshino were included, the Baruba Empire would only have 10 Rank 9 powerhouses. 10 Rank 9 powerhouses. The strongest among them was only a mid-Rank 9 powerhouse. The rest were all beginner Rank 9 powerhouses. There was no way they could stop a pseudo-demigod. The higher-ups of the Baruba Empire had always thought that the guardian deity was in the palace. They also thought that the one who led the magical beast army to attack the Baruba Empire was the pseudo-divinity Beast King who had been severely injured by Violet and was now sealed away. That was why they had been so relaxed, even when they heard that a large group of human traders had sneaked into the palace. But now, the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire finally realized just how perilous the situation they were in. This was a crisis that could destroy the empire at any time. Your Majesty, Kaluan asked in a questioning tone. Your Majesty already knew that the guardian deity wasn't in the palace, right? Why did he keep such an important matter a secret? So what if I did? Gouda looked at Kaluan coldly. Can you think of a solution if I tell you? Korin clenched his teeth tightly and his face grew paler and paler. Indeed, even if Gouda were to announce the absence of the protector to the public, it would be useless. Not only would that not have any beneficial effects, but it would also cause the people of the Baruba Empire to waver and cause their morale to plummet. After all, the guardian deity was not around. However, the other party had a pseudo-demigod expert. The war the Baruba Empire was fighting wasn't really a war. It would be better to say that it was a deathbed struggle. Even if they managed to defeat the demonic beasts, the Baruba Empire's capital would still be destroyed as soon as the demigod Beast King joined the fray. This was the effect of being a strong cultivator. Therefore, the Spalier world had always believed that the strong were the most important, not the royalty. In front of the strong, the royalty was nothing. The current situation proved this point. The guardian god is not here, but the enemy has a pseudo-demigod expert. Not only that, the previous Beast King has actually advanced to the pseudo-demigod level. Even the combined efforts of 5 pseudo-demigod experts could only seal him. Will sighed. If that's the case, even if we do have a way to deal with the Beast King, as long as the pseudo-demigod Beast King breaks out of the seal, the Spalier world will still be finished. It's not just the Spalier world, even the Baruba Empire is in danger. Gubai laughed bitterly. Don't forget, didn't Milina say that there are traitors in our capital? The guardian deity was not here, but the enemy had a pseudo-demigod expert. Even if they had a way to deal with the pseudo-demigod Beast King, there was still the pseudo-demigod Beast King that all the demigods in the Spalier world could only barely seal. Not only that, but there were also traitors hiding in the capital. Each of these 3 factors could lead to the destruction of the Baruba Empire and the entire Spalier world. Originally, the Baruba Empire's higher-ups did not think that they would lose the war against the demonic beasts. The Baruba Empire's desert terrain was advantageous for the Baruba Empire's citizens to fight. The capital was also located in a natural stronghold. Compared to the demonic beasts that had left the behemoth forest to attack, the Baruba Empire had too many advantages in this war. If that was the case, how could they possibly lose? But now, the Baruba Empire's higher-ups had finally fallen from their absolute confidence to the bottom of the abyss. If this continued, the Baruba Empire would definitely be destroyed. Father. Jafar's voice was a little hoarse. What should we do now? In the hall, All the upper echelons looked at Guda in confusion, which made Guda pull himself together. A demigod beast king isn't something we can come into contact with or deal with. We can only place our hopes on the 5 demigods and Lady Purple from the capital of alternate generations. Now we must focus on the enemy before us. Guda's calm voice rang in everyone's ears. No matter what, the news of the guardian deity not being in the capital cannot be leaked. Otherwise, if the guardian deity and his army of demonic beasts find out, they will come personally. We will not be able to stop them. The Baruba Empire's higher-ups nodded. Guda took a deep breath, his eyes cold. Secondly, the traitors in the capital are a huge threat. We must find a way to drag them out. Otherwise, the capital will fall into their hands sooner or later. At this point, Guda looked at Cultivation, Will and Jebi. Since the betrayers came from other cities, they are either small fries who can't do anything, or they are members of your 3 clans. The 3 of you will be responsible for finding them. That's right. You must find all of them. Zhang Lixing sneered. That's right. Cultivation, Will and Jebi's expressions turned serious. The rest of the Baruba Empire's higher-ups were also on edge. Yes. Seeing this, Guda nodded and turned to look at Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino and the other girls. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end he still looked at the big picture and sighed. This is a moment of life and death for the Baruba Empire. I hope that everyone can let bygones be bygones and help the Baruba Empire. When Kotori explained the situation of the 5 demigods and the pseudo-demigod beast king in the Spalier world, she also revealed her own trump card. 5,000 powerhouses that could exhibit strength of the 8th level. This was definitely a great help. With the help of these 5,000 8th level powerhouses at the very least, there was no possibility of losing in the war against the magical beasts. On top of that, these 6 girls were all Type 9 powerhouses. They were already more powerful than the Baruba Empire. Guda would have to be out of his mind to think that men were superior to women and force them to give up such a huge help. The rest of the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire also thought of this point. They lowered their heads in sullenness. He had thought that they were just a bunch of pretty women. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, these women had turned into existences that even the emperor of the Baruba Empire would have to seek help from. This made the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire, who had just made things difficult for the Baruba Empire, feel awkward and ashamed. They were afraid that the other party would hold a grudge. If they let this huge help slip away right before their eyes, many of them would regret it so much that they wouldn't be able to sleep. It had to be said that the actions of these people did indeed make Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino and the other girls especially unhappy. However, the girls still knew the severity of the matter. The survival of the Baruba Empire didn't matter, but the pseudo-demigod beast king was a real threat. If they couldn't delay the other party and let them discover that the pseudo-demigod beast king was sealed, they would definitely change their target and attack the capital to rescue the pseudo-demigod beast king. That was what the girls were truly worried about. In order to prevent the capital from being destroyed, the girls would take the initiative to attack and delay the 3 beast kings. Thinking of this, the girls nodded. The upper echelons of the Baruba Empire let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 1931. Sigh. After leaving the central hall of the Baruba Empire's palace, Toka sighed as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. Hey. Siwan, who had been tightly grabbing onto 10 fragrant sleeves and had a pitiful expression as if he had been bullied, spoke with some concern. No one would have thought that he was a 9th-level expert. Miss Toka, are you hungry again? Yes. Yes, I am indeed a little hungry. 10 Fragrance first rubbed her lower abdomen that did not have a trace of excess fat before shaking her head. And I feel a little tired. Tired? Kurumi looked at 10 Incense with a surprised expression. This is really strange. Toka's not exactly a lively person, but she's definitely a cheerful one. Therefore, in the past when 10 Fragrances was tired, he would only sigh when he was hungry. It was indeed quite strange. Because those people inside are really too annoying. 10 Fragrances wrinkled her little nose. Although I don't know why I feel that they are very annoying, but every time I see their eyes I feel very annoyed. As expected of Miss Toka, I feel the same. Meijio nodded in agreement. Those men's gazes are really annoying. It's as if they treat people as snacks. They eat and throw them away as they wish. It's really unpleasant. No, I must take a shower when I get back. My skin feels rough after being stared at for so long. Although, I'm not as annoyed as Miss Toka and Meijio. For said shyly. But I don't really like those people. Well, I can understand your feelings. Kotori crossed her arms. The lollipop in her mouth seemed to have melted, leaving only a tube. She held it in her mouth like a toothpick. To be honest, I really want to leave. But even if it's for the otherworldly capital, it's fine. We have to stop the fake Beast King who led the attack on the Baruba Empire's Beast Army. So let's endure for now. Endure? Origami asked without changing his expression. How long should we endure? It's up to you. Kotori replied casually. Anyway, if you can endure it, then endure it. If you can't, then don't endure it. As long as they don't mess with us. Let's take it as though we were on an unpleasant excursion. But if you come knocking on my door, then don't be polite. Don't be so courteous. Is that so? The fourth boneless one looked a little timid. Are you going to fight? Looking at fourth shaman who seemed to be a little scared except for the new member. Aside from Meijio and the slow-witted Toka, Kotori, Kurumi and Origami who didn't know much about the four Kino's past, all of them came to their senses. The group of girls had almost forgotten that before she met Wu Yen, this doll-like petite girl in front of them was a girl who was so kind-hearted that even if someone wanted to kill her, she wouldn't want them to feel pain from the bottom of her heart. She wouldn't blame anyone, let alone hate anyone. Even if someone wanted to kill Yoshino, Yoshino would not hold a grudge and would even think for this person. Now if he told Yoshino that if someone came to find him he should not be polite, Yoshino would probably feel very embarrassed, right? It seems a little difficult for fourth shaman to do all this. Kotori looked at Toka. Toka, I'll leave fourth shaman in your care. No problem. Toka perked up and said confidently. I won't let fourth shaman be bullied. I want to protect the cute fourth shaman too. Meijio immediately came over and hugged her sister-in-law, rubbing against her smooth cheeks. Fourth shaman, let me protect you well. From the beginning to the end. From the inside out. Yua. The group of girls gradually walked away amidst the banter. They did not notice that at this moment at the entrance of the central hall, two pairs of eyes were watching them. It's a middle-aged man in his 40s and a young man in his 20s. If Milena was here she would definitely recognize this middle-aged man and young man. That middle-aged man is the current head of the Baruba Empire's #1 family, the Moma family and Milena's teacher Mans. As for the youth in his 20s he was Man's son, Kluan's grandson, and the young master of the Morma family, the #1 family in the Baruba Empire, Isaac. The two of them stood in the same spot and stared at the group of girls who were fooling around as they walked away. Only when the group of girls had completely disappeared did they withdraw their gazes. A Tier 9 powerhouse. Mans covered his chest that was still in pain from vomiting blood due to the counterpressure of the girl's aura in the hall. A trace of gloom appeared in his eyes. How can a group of young girls reach such a level? As the head of the Moma family, Man's strength has reached the bottom line of the heads of the three major families. He's weaker than the 9th shaman in his family but stronger than the others. He's at the peak of the 8th shaman family. Come to think of it, it's been 10 years since Mans reached the peak of the 8th shaman family. 10 years ago, when Mans had advanced to the peak of the 8th order, Kluan had given him the position of patriarch. During the 10 years he had been the patriarch, Mans had never slacked off on his cultivation. Even so, for 10 whole years, Mans had not been able to cross the threshold and advance to the 9th order. Hence, when he saw that the young and beautiful girls had all reached the realm that he had always dreamed of, Mans felt a little indignant and helpless. His tone was full of complicated emotions. Don't worry about it. Of course, Mans wasn't the only one who felt complicated. Isaac also looked in the direction the girls left, his eyes filled with uncertainty. They were only at the 8th shaman family when they were in the academy. It hasn't even been half a year since they graduated. From the 8th shaman family to the 9th shaman family in half a year? If they're at the peak of the 8th shaman family, then it's understandable. After all, there's only one step between the peak of the 8th shaman family. This step is so far away that it's despairing. At the very least, Mans hasn't been able to cross it in 10 years. However, if you want to say it's simple, it's also very simple. It's hard to say when you'll cross it. As the young master of the Moma family, the #1 family in the Baruba Empire, Isaac was also a student of the Silveria World Institute. He was also the leader of one of the 12 strongest factions in the Baruba Empire. Therefore he was familiar with the group of girls. In Isaac's opinion, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino were only at the 8th shaman family when they were still studying at the academy. They were far from the peak of the 8th shaman family. It's unbelievable that they could reach the 9th shaman family in half a year. Of course, no matter who it is, it'd be strange if they weren't suspicious when they saw a group of young girls at the peak of the 9th shaman family. Hey father. Isaac's eyes flickered. That Wu Yen reached the 9th shaman family at a young age. Now these girls by his side have also reached the 9th shaman family. Say, do you think this capital of a different generation has a method to quickly reach the 9th shaman family? Hearing this, a glint flashed in Man's eyes. Obviously he had the same idea. When Wu Yen reached Tier 9 in his 20s he was already considered the youngest Tier 9 in history. Now there are Tier 9 individuals younger than him popping up one after another. Moreover, they are all close to the youngest Tier 9 in history. It's hard not to be suspicious of him. Mans turned his head and looked at his son. When he saw that his son's eyes were filled with infatuation, greed, dominance, evil and other possessiveness as he watched the group of girls leave, Mans smiled. Of course, Mans knew what his son's plan was. But he didn't object. In fact, he approved. As long as Isaac succeeds, it'll be a great benefit to both the Moma family and himself. Mans patted Isaac's shoulder. Do what you want. With his father's support, Isaac's eyes immediately lit up and he nodded excitedly. His gaze became sharper as he looked in the direction where the group of young ladies had left. It was like he was looking at something that belonged to him. Chapter 1932. Within the palace of the Baruba Empire's capital, there was a spacious resting area that was specially reserved for guests from the outside. This resting area was to the east of the palace. Not only was the environment beautiful, but it was also surrounded by a verdant bamboo forest. There were also extremely luxurious halls and courtyards. The air was even filled with a fragrance that came from an unknown place. Anyone who smelled it would feel refreshed and there was no way to find fault with it. This vast resting area was also divided into 3 areas according to the identity, status, and strength of the guests. The first district was provided for those powerhouses or forces with a small reputation. Generally speaking, only those with strength of the 8th order and a certain status would be able to stay here if they came to the palace as a guest. The second district was reserved for those who were at least at the peak of the Type 8 realm and had a background not weaker than the 3 great clans of the Baruba Empire. Only those with a good reputation would have the qualifications to stay here. For example, the 3 great clans of the Ailu and Fea empires would stay here when they visited. The third district was the most luxurious place in the palace for VIPs. Those who could live here were either royalty of the Ailu and Fea empires. For example, Kate and Sylph were the most popular princesses in Silveria. They were also the most powerful beings in Silveria. That is, a 9th stage powerhouse. Those who fit these 2 criteria were few and far between in the Spalier world. In terms of status and power, they were on par with the emperor of the Baruba Empire. They were truly honored guests. Normally, they wouldn't even visit the Baruba Empire's royal palace. Thus, the third section of the resting area was always empty. There were very few people who could stay here. But today, one of the villas in the third section had finally welcomed its own residents. Although it was only temporary. The villa's size was obvious. In terms of size, it was comparable to Guda's palace. Not only did it have a large hall, it also had many bedrooms. There was also a side room that was specially used for training or practicing battle skills or magic. It was well equipped. However, who were these girls? Even though Kotori and Origami were just ordinary kids in the dating battle world, and their houses were also the size of an ordinary family's, Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino were all elves living under a fence. Their living conditions were definitely not as good as this villa. But it wasn't like the girls hadn't stayed in a good place before. Kotori had lived in a luxurious suite in Ratatosker's headquarters that was even more luxurious than this villa. Origami had also participated in a special training session with the higher-ups as a member of AST and enjoyed the treatment of the higher-ups. They had stayed in a villa on Dokdo Island. Plus, one of them was the commander of Ratatosker and the other was indifferent. A villa, no matter how luxurious it was, couldn't stir their emotions. Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino had also stayed in a luxurious villa as special students in the Spalier World Academy. Hence, they weren't surprised by this villa. As for Meijio, she was even more surprised. Unlike the other girls, this popular idol singer was a real missy. Her house in the date battle could no longer be described as a villa, but a luxurious mansion. Therefore, nothing special happened when the girls moved into this villa. When the sky turned dark, the girls gathered in the hall on the first floor to discuss the matter of the pseudo-beast king. Unlike Shokuhu Misaki's party, Kotori's party didn't have anyone with Pandora mode like Astria. She didn't have anyone with peak tier 9 strength like Astria. Even with Astria's help, Shokuhu Misaki's group still had to resort to poison and ambush to kill the pseudo-beast king. That's why Kotori's group couldn't do anything to the pseudo-demigod beast king if they didn't come up with a strategy. However, only Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami participated in the discussion. Meijio wasn't the smart type. She was even a little naive. Yoshino was too pure and kind to participate in the discussion. As for Toka, there was no need to mention Toka. If Meijio isn't the smart type, then Toka isn't the smart type. She's a complete idiot who can't come up with any good ideas. While Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami were discussing the battle strategy, Toka, Meijio, and Yoshino could only sit on the side and kill time. At this time, Meijio was happily teasing Yoshino and Yoshino. She enjoyed Yoshino's cute performance when she panicked, blushed, and her heart raced. She also enjoyed Yoshino's playful and funny performance. After a while, she turned her head and looked at the unhappy Toka. She tilted her head. "Miss Toka, are you still hungry and tired?" "Of course not." Toka pouted. "I'm just thinking about what Shido is doing right now." Toka isn't sure if it's just her imagination, but Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami's discussion seemed to have quieted down when Shido was mentioned. "Brother Shido?" Yoshino blinked her cute eyes. Meijio almost fainted from her cuteness. "Miss Toka, are you thinking about Brother Shido?" It's not that I want to." Xianxia's pretty face turned slightly red as she stammered. "I should say I'm feeling a little lonely. I miss Shido's cooking. There are various reasons." Hearing Toka's hesitant, embarrassed, weak and perfunctory words, the group of girls shook their heads and laughed. "Miss Toka, there's no need to worry about my dear." Meijio puffed out her almost invincible chest. Her tone was full of confidence and pride. "Even if it's in another world, my dear must be very active. Maybe it's doing something very powerful that we don't know about. When it comes back, my dear will deal with all the demigod and demigod beast kings. I'm sure he's active." On the side, Kotori coldly interjected and told the girls just how much she cared about this topic. "Or rather, I'll be surprised if he's willing to settle down." Era, Miss Kotori, you're not telling the truth." Kurumi spread her hands. It was a casual action, but it had an indescribable beauty to it. "Miss Kotori, you must be missing your brother, right?" "Who's missing him?" Kotori raised an eyebrow and curled her lips in disdain. "I hope he doesn't return." Before Kotori could finish her words, the surrounding girls all cast curious and mocking gazes at her. Kotori's disdainful expression froze and she couldn't continue her sentence. Instead, she revealed an angry expression. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Shido said. Origami's voice was emotionless as usual, but the content of her words almost made Kotori explode. "You're acting like a tsundere. You're the tsundere." Kotori was going crazy. "Your whole family is tsundere." "Alright, Miss Kotori is going to get angry if we keep talking. It's getting late, let's get some rest." Kurumi stretched and yawned cutely. "We won't be able to come to a conclusion today, let's continue tomorrow." Kotori snorted but didn't object. The other girls nodded as well. Just as the group of young ladies were about to return to their respective rooms to rest, a series of knocks suddenly sounded at the door. The girls were surprised at first, then they looked at each other. They don't know anyone in the Baruba Empire's palace. Some of them are even on bad terms. Who would come looking for them in the middle of the night? "I'll go open the door." With such doubts in mind, Kotori stepped forward and opened the door. The figure standing before the door stunned Kotori and the group of young ladies. It's a young man they don't know. Judging from the luxurious decorations he's wearing, he doesn't seem like a normal person. The girls thought he was a servant. The person who came was precisely Isaac. Chapter 1933. Standing at the entrance of the villa, Isaac looked at Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, and Yoshino, who were looking at him with surprise. Although he had a smile on his face, his heart was burning with passion. He couldn't help it. The group of girls in front of him had the best looks that Isaac had ever seen in his life. He couldn't help but be tempted. Let's not talk about Toka for now. This girl who was looking at him with a surprised expression had a dreamy appearance that others would only see in their dreams. Her long purple hair that naturally hung down to her shoulders and waist was tied into a ponytail that burst out like water under the binding of a bow-knot-like hairband. Her clear eyes reflected an indescribable and inconceivable color. That appearance that even a goddess would be jealous of was enough to snatch away a person's sight, attention, and even heart in an instant, revealing an extraordinary beauty. Who wouldn't be tempted by such an unbelievably beautiful girl? Even if there were no other factors causing trouble, Isaac was certain that if he had the chance to get close to her, it would be worth it no matter what price he had to pay. Standing closest to Toka was Origami. When Isaac first laid his eyes on this slender girl, he felt that she was very special. Her short white hair, which could almost touch her shoulders, was soft and cold. She was like a doll, just like an artifact that had been measured. Her upright and pretty face had an exquisiteness that was not inferior to 10 fragrances. Although there was almost nothing called expression on her face compared to the former, the latter's coldness was also extremely attractive, especially to Isaac. After all, as a former student of the Spalier World Academy, Isaac had seen Sylph's cold beauty up close more than once. She was the idol of the entire academy, and her cold elegance could captivate the hearts of all students. It was impossible for Isaac to not be tempted by a girl like Sylph, who had extraordinary talent and a strong background. Unfortunately, Sylph didn't seem to be tempted at all. Isaac, who had been itching to pursue her, couldn't find a single flaw. Now Isaac saw Origami's cold and elegant beauty that was similar to Sylph's. How could he not be excited when he saw Origami, who once harbored evil intentions towards Sylph? Compared to Toka and Origami, Meijio didn't have an outstanding temperament, but her appearance was slightly more mature. Her dignified and beautiful face was extremely alluring. However, what was even more alluring was Meijio's flawless body that no one could find fault with. It could even be said that no one could compare to her body. If one could embrace that body, what kind of softness would that lucky man be filled with? It was a fatal temptation that made one's breath quicken. Of course, even though Meijio's appearance and figure were top-notch, what really intoxicated Isaac was her voice. Her voice was the voice of a true angel. Ever since this girl appeared in front of Isaac in the central hall of the palace, she had only said one sentence that was extremely insulting to men. However, when she said that sentence, her voice was like poison, and Isaac was completely addicted to it. Isaac could even imagine that if she used this voice to moan with a man, it would definitely be an unparalleled pleasure for the man. Toka, Origami, and Meijio. The 3 different girls all had the capital to make men unable to stop. If it wasn't for the fact that the 3 girls also had the terrifying strength that made no one dare to take half a step into the lightning pool, Isaac wouldn't have been stingy with using some despicable means to take the 3 girls into his pocket. Isaac believed that even if there were women in the world who could be compared to Toka, Origami, and Meijio, he wouldn't be able to find anyone who could surpass them in terms of attractiveness. However, Isaac now realized that he was wrong, and very wrong. There were women who were more attractive to Isaac than the 3 of them. It was that girl who stood in a dark corner and seemed to have all the light in the world focused on her. Her beauty was breathtaking. It was a beauty that could make one's body tremble. Her jet-black waist-length hair was tied into 2 bundles, hanging obediently in front of her body. Her skin was as white as a pearl, and the slight exposed part of her neck gave people the feeling that it would break with just a little bit of force. The young lady's bangs covered more than half of her astonishingly beautiful face, and even one of her eyes was covered. However, Isaac couldn't help but thank the girl for covering one of his eyes. Because Isaac was actually a little scared. He was scared that the girl's eyes had a charm that was even more alluring than the girl's beautiful appearance. Isaac felt that as long as he saw the girl's covered eyes, he would completely fall at her feet. He would no longer be able to struggle free from her breathtaking beauty. Of course, if it was just in terms of appearance, Kurumi was only on the same level as Toka, Origami, and Meijio. What made Isaac almost lose himself in Kurumi's attractiveness was her temperament. It was as sweet as an angel's and as dangerous as a demon's. It just so happened that Isaac was infatuated with this contradictory yet challenging temperament. Thus he fell for Kurumi's attractiveness. As for Kotori and Yono, although they were still a little immature in some areas, one was as beautiful as a work of art and the other was as cute as a doll. When they grow up, they wouldn't be inferior to the other 4 girls. The rare beauties in the past were now standing within his reach. He only had to stretch out his hand and he would be able to touch them. Each of them was comparable to Sylph, whom he once admired. The fire in Isaac's heart was unimaginable. Even if it was any other man, as long as he had a normal sexual orientation and aesthetic standards, he wouldn't be able to avoid the same reaction. Moreover, these girls were all far more talented and powerful than Sylph, who dominated the Spalier World Academy for many years. Isaac's eyes almost turned red when he thought about how he could win their hearts. 6 Tier 9 powerhouses. That's already more powerful than the Baruba Empire. After all, even the Baruba Empire only had Gida, Kuluan, Will and Gubai on the surface, wasn't it? Moreover, the other party might have a way to quickly reach the Tier 9 realm. As long as he could obtain the hearts of these girls, not only would Isaac be able to possess 6 extremely beautiful girls with extremely powerful battle prowess, he would also be able to raise the status of the Emoma family to a level that would surpass that of the royal family. He would also be able to make his position in the family unbreakable. He would also be able to obtain the opportunity to advance to the 9th level. No matter how one looked at it, it was an extremely great temptation. Once he thought of the various benefits and then took in the group of young ladies before him with their extremely beautiful looks and otherworldly temperaments, Isaac secretly swore in his heart that even if he had to pay a price for himself, he would still successfully take these young ladies into his pocket. Isaac had great confidence in his looks, temperament, achievements and so on. He was the young clan leader of the Emoma clan, the #1 clan in the Baruba Empire. Furthermore, he possessed the outstanding talent and strength to advance to the peak of rank 7 at the age of 20. Over the years, there were countless talented young ladies who had been toyed with by Isaac. That's why Isaac never thought he would hit a wall. She wondered if Isaac had thought of this before. In terms of background, status, would these girls care about Isaac's background, status when they even dared to take care of Gida? In terms of strength, Isaac couldn't even compare to a single finger of these girls. In terms of talent, he was only at the peak of the Tier 7 realm at the age of 20. Compared to himself, who reached the Tier 9 realm before the age of 20, how bad was his talent? In terms of achievements, Isaac couldn't even enter the eyes of these girls. In terms of looks and temperament, were these girls shallow women who would be moved by these things? The answer was no. This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that these girls already had someone they couldn't shake in their hearts. This pitiful man who was greedy to the point of wanting to swallow an elephant and never thought about whether he was worthy or not was destined to meet a tragedy. R1152. Chapter 1934. Isaac didn't even consider that a true 9th stage powerhouse, even if he really lowered his status to take a look at him, could he afford to offend him? True powerhouses had strong self-esteem. Even if they didn't mind that their other half was weaker than them and had a lower status than them, they still had to know their own limits. Since they wanted to pursue an existence that was originally unattainable, then the only right way was to devote themselves to it, right? Isaac, on the other hand, was so greedy that he wanted to win the hearts of 6 girls who were at the top of the Spalier world in terms of appearance, temperament, strength, background, status, and so on. Isn't this the same as a snake trying to swallow an elephant? Of course, this was also the Baruba Empire's patriarchal mindset. In the hearts of the Baruba Empire's men, the status of women was lower than their own. Having multiple wives and concubines was nothing to them. They would never consider whether or not their other half would mind if they were fickle in love. This kind of situation was even more obvious when the person he was pursuing was someone he couldn't even hope to reach. Isaac was confident that he could win the hearts of these girls, but he didn't know that he was already out of the game when he tried to woo 6 girls who were more outstanding than him. On the other hand, the girls didn't know that they were being targeted by someone with bad intentions. Kotori was still in the middle of opening the door. She glanced at the luxurious clothes on him. He didn't look like an ordinary person at all. Isaac had a handsome smile on his face, but his eyes were fixed on her. She raised an eyebrow. "You are? Miss Kotori sure is forgetful." Isaac didn't bother with pleasantries. Instead, he spoke in a friendly tone. You remember Milina but you don't remember me? Kotori knitted her brows. Then she seemed to recall something and nodded in realization. I remember now. You're the leader of the Emerald Tower, one of the 12 strongest factions in the Spalier world, right? The Emerald Tower is the representative faction of the Mama family in the Spalier world. Isaac and Milina were both members of the Emerald Tower. The difference is, as the young master of the Mama family, Isaac is the leader of the Emerald Tower. On the other hand, Milina, who is stronger and more talented than Isaac, is only a member of the Emerald Tower. Kotori listened to Fei Fei's explanation of each of the 12 strongest factions in Silveria World Institute more than once. After hearing about Isaac and Milina's situation, Kotori was shocked. She even asked about the details with a heart full of doubts. That was only natural. Just like the deadly forest. Lulu is the only daughter of the Lori family head Lar. However, he wasn't the leader of the deadly forest. Fei Fei, on the other hand, was only Lar's disciple. This proved that the 12 strongest factions don't necessarily need a direct descendant of the family to be the leader. Therefore, although Isaac was the young patriarch of the Moma family in terms of excellence, Milina was still more outstanding. Milina even occupied one of the top 10 rankings, while Isaac was ranked after the top 10. This also proved that Milina was the more outstanding side. Logically speaking, Milina should be the leader, not Isaac, right? Originally, Kotori had thought that Isaac was outstanding in some areas other than his strength, such as strategy and foresight, which was why he became the leader. That wasn't surprising at all. However, Fei Fei refuted her on the spot. Compared to Milina, Isaac can't compare to her in anything other than his status. The only reason he's the leader is because of his status and the fact that the Baruba Empire doesn't value women. After knowing this, Kotori no longer paid attention to this man who became the leader because he was the young patriarch of the Emerald Tower. Instead, she had some impression of Milina, who had the strongest combat strength in the Emerald Tower. This was the reason. If Isaac hadn't mentioned it himself and Kotori had met Isaac a few times in the past, she wouldn't have remembered this man who talked to himself. It's a good thing that Ms. Kotori still remembers me. Otherwise, I'd really wonder if my presence is a little weak. Isaac had no idea that Kotori already had the impression that his status was his only merit. He laughed as if they were close friends. Ever since you ladies graduated from the academy, I thought I'd never have the chance to meet you ladies again. I didn't expect you ladies to visit my country today. I'm really happy. However, it wasn't appropriate for me to show my face in front of His Majesty, so I only came to greet you now. I hope you don't think I'm the one who neglected you. Even someone as astute as Kotori couldn't help but be taken aback by Isaac's polite and friendly words. She couldn't help but mutter inwardly. Don't tell me all the students from the Spalier World Academy are so friendly to their former classmates? You're being too courteous. Kotori replied in a neutral tone. Well then, Mr. Isaac, is there anything you need from us? Yes. Well, if you want to talk about something, there is indeed something. Isaac scratched his head as if he was embarrassed. Actually, I'm here to apologize. Apologize? Kotori and the other girls were stunned. I'm really sorry. Isaac's expression turned serious. Today the Baruba Empire did something impolite to all of you because of a small matter. At that time, due to my position, I had no choice but to follow suit. Ever since then, I felt very bad about it. That's why I've come to apologize. Please forgive my rudeness. When Isaac said this, not only was his expression very serious, but his tone was also very sincere. Although Isaac didn't think that it was rude of him to make a move at that time, it was true that he had come to apologize. He didn't want to leave a bad impression in the hearts of the girls because of some small matter, so he wanted to redeem himself with an apology. In other words, the apology was just a means to achieve his goal. And there's a follow-up to this. Without waiting for the group of girls to speak, Isaac hurriedly spoke. To express my apologies, why don't I be the guest and treat all of you to a meal? You ladies haven't eaten yet, right? Treat? Even though Kotori, Kurumi, Meijio and Origami didn't realize Isaac's true intention, they all furrowed their brows. Even the glutton Toka and the docile Yoshino had the same reaction. There's no other reason, it's just that the girls don't want to eat with strange men when Wu Yen isn't around. At that moment, the Origami head spoke in an extremely calm tone. I'm not going. Origami did not explain why or reject the request. After expressing her attitude in an unusually concise manner, she did not say another word. Isaac, who thought that the girls had no reason to reject the request, was stunned. "I'm not going either." Miyuki maintained her frown and waved her hand in disgust. "I hate being too close to men." This unreasonable statement made the stunned Isaac's expression change. "I'm not going either." Yoshino spoke in a timid but firm tone. "If it's just a meal. I want to eat here." Toka hesitated between eating and not eating. In the end, she didn't want to get too close to a strange man because of a meal. She shook her head reluctantly. "I'm not going either." "Allah." Kurumi gently caressed his cheek and tilted her head. The flirtatious expression she displayed at that moment made Isaac's heart tremble. However, the words she said made Isaac's heart sink. "I also don't want to eat with a man other than Owner-sama." Owner-sama? Isaac's heart sank to the bottom because of Kurumi's title. Could it be that this beauty already has a master? At the thought of this possibility, not only did Isaac's heart sink to the bottom of the valley, even the look in his eyes turned ferocious in an instant. One had to know that among the group of girls, the one who attracted Isaac the most was Kurumi. However, Isaac did not notice that the trace of savagery in his eyes had finally torn apart his disguise. A cold glint flashed in Kotori's eyes as she observed him. She sneered inwardly. "Looks like my sisters don't want to go out." Kotori smiled. "However, we'll accept your apology. Thank you for your kind intentions, sir." Isaac's face finally darkened. Chapter 1935. Before coming to visit the young ladies, Isaac had made a lot of preparations. He had come up with many countermeasures for various situations in an attempt to gain the favor of the young ladies. It had to be said that although Isaac was a little greedy and self-righteous, he did have some skills when it came to wooing girls. It wasn't hard to see how many girls he had harmed. He didn't think that he would be able to win over his target in one fell swoop. He was just trying to gain a little bit of favor for his future plans. Therefore, before coming, Isaac had also thought about the various reactions the girls would have to his visit and had made preparations to deal with it. However, Isaac had thought that the group of girls would put on airs and treat him with contempt or indifference. He also thought that the group of girls would be disgusted with him because of what happened during the day. He also thought that the group of girls would vent their anger on him for the treatment they received during the day. However, he didn't think that things would develop like this. Isaac believed that the reason he found for treating them was not stiff or unreasonable at all. He also believed that there was a high chance that he would be rejected. Therefore, in response to the possible answers the group of girls might give, Isaac had also come up with a set of words to convince them. As long as he brought out these words, whether it was because of their pride or because they used to be in the same school, the group of girls would have no choice but to reluctantly agree. As long as they agreed, Isaac had hundreds of ways to make the group of girls see him in a different light. Or at least leave some impression and influence. But now, what was the reason that Isaac heard? Not going? What kind of reason was this? She hated being too close to men? This was indeed a reason, but what could Isaac use to convince the other party? Eat here? Wouldn't all of Isaac's previous arrangements be ruined? This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was the reason that Kurumi gave. She didn't want to eat with any man other than her husband. Isaac was absolutely certain that he had heard the words Lord Husband. What did this mean? It meant that the woman he liked was already taken and was even married. Isaac had indeed used his own methods to deceive many young ladies, but as a person of the empire where men were superior to women, men who cared about their status would never ruin their own reputation for a married woman. Therefore, even though Isaac had been a playboy for many years, he had never had the thought of having a relationship with a married woman, let alone pursuing a married woman openly. If Kurumi was really married to another man, Isaac could directly declare that he had failed. How could Isaac, who was full of confidence before, not go crazy with anger? Especially when he saw Kurumi tilted her head. Isaac's heart became boiling hot as he looked at her charming and seductive appearance while she gently caressed her cheeks. He roared crazily in his heart. Impossible. She's mine. Unaware that he had been seen through by Kotori, Isaac tried his best to suppress his emotions and put on a smile. But this smile was different from before. It was already a little difficult. Kurumi is already married? Isaac's tone was like, stop joking as he tried to cover it up. Kurumi, you really like to joke around. She just graduated not long ago. How could she get married so quickly? This was the only excuse Isaac could come up with to comfort himself. Although Spalier World Academy didn't forbid students from getting married, Spalier World Academy gathered the best cultivation resources in the three empires. Everyone who entered the academy wanted to fight for more resources to cultivate, who would be in the mood to get married. Of course, there were quite a few who were engaged or privately committed to marriage, but the students would still prioritize increasing their own strength. It wouldn't be too late to wait until they graduated before getting married. Thus, there really hadn't been a married student in the academy. Kurumi graduated not long ago. Even if she wanted to get married, she would have to spend a lot of time just to choose a good date. It was a bit of a stretch for her to get married. Although it was a self-comforting reason, Isaac's reason was still reasonable and well-founded. Unfortunately, when she heard Isaac's words, Kwang San smiled sweetly. Her smile was so big that her eyes curved into crescent moons. Although we're not officially married yet, everything I have has been taken away by him. Isaac's laughter came to an abrupt halt. Ah, Kurumi held her cheeks and made a bashful expression. Her beautiful face was flushed red. Even now I still remember those few nights. My husband put me in an embarrassing position, took off my clothes and licked every part of my body. He even investigated me carefully. Especially that night, my husband was really bad. He didn't give me a chance to speak and impatiently pushed me down. He even used that big thing to penetrate my body. It was really hot. So hot. Such an explicit description was like a huge hammer that hammered into Isaac's heart. Isaac's face turned green, white, red, and black. It was simply wonderful. Kurumi. Fragrance was also embarrassed by Kurumi's words. Her entire face turned red and she shouted with shame and indignation. What nonsense are you talking about? That's right. That's right. Meijio pouted angrily. Just when Isaac thought that Meijio was going to reprimand him, Meijio angrily said such a sentence. I'm so envious. No. I also want to spend a hot night with my darling. Isaac's eyes widened to their widest extent. Could it be that this beautiful girl with a heavenly voice was also taken like Kwang San? And it was the same person? Wah wah. For cried out shyly. Miss Meijio. Please don't say any more, Era. Kurumi giggled as she moved her face closer to Yoshino's face. Don't tell me Fragrance doesn't want to spend a hot night with husband? A hot night. With a bang, Bonnie's face turned completely red. She tightly grabbed her hat and covered her head. She no longer dared to show her face to anyone. Seeing this, Isaac's pupils dilated again. Even this person, Kurumi. Fragrance shouted angrily. Her face was still red. Don't say strange things again. That's a pity. Kurumi smiled happily. I wanted husband to dote on Miss Fragrance, but I didn't expect Miss Fragrance to hate husband so much. I don't hate Sherdao. Incense immediately jumped up and shouted without hesitation. I like Sherdao the most. I can't pretend I didn't hear you. Origami couldn't take it anymore and stood up. Her expressionless face turned hostile as she looked at Fragrance. I'm definitely the one who likes Sherdao the most. There's more. Origami turned her hostile gaze to Kurumi. Although I didn't spend a good night with Sherdao, I licked his entire body. Era. Kurumi and Miji were shocked. Toka and Yoshino's faces turned red. On the other hand, Isaac's body trembled again and again. Every word from the girls was like a fatal blow, hitting him so hard that he staggered back, his face turning green. Kurumi, Fragrance, Meijio, Origami and Fragrance. These girls are the best in the world in terms of strength, background, status, appearance and temperament. They're all taken? And they're all the same person? Well, it's just as you thought. Looking at Isaac's green face, Kotori smirked maliciously and delivered the final blow. By the way, I'm also in love with that person. Not only is he our future husband, he's also the fiancé of Ailu Empire's genius princess, Sylph. Sylph's fiancé? It's him. Rian. Isaac's body began to tremble violently as if he was suffering from epilepsy. The green color on his face had completely turned red. Pfft. Immediately Isaac spat out a mouthful of blood. He couldn't take the blow and fell to the ground unconscious. Chapter 1936. Looking at Isaac, who had completely fainted after spitting out a mouthful of blood and falling to the ground, the group of girls were all dumbfounded. This 10 Fragrance, Meijio and Siyu Nai, who did not understand what was going on, were completely at a loss. What the hell is going on? Unlike Toka, Meijio, and Yoshino, who didn't understand what was going on, Origami frowned slightly and understood what was going on. Kurumi blinked her eyes and the shy expression on her face had completely disappeared. It was replaced with a disappointed expression. Kotori also understood what happened. Unlike Isaac, Kurumi had already guessed Isaac's intention from the very beginning. She had already guessed Isaac's purpose for coming to find them. But that's not surprising. Back in the date battle world, before she met Wu Yan, Kurumi relied on her charm to attract a lot of boys who wanted to hit on her. She lured them to a secluded place and absorbed their time. She used them as a resource to activate her angel. That's why Kurumi was very sensitive to men who wanted to do something to her. It wasn't strange for her to see through Isaac's intentions. That's why she said a series of explicit words to provoke Isaac. Poor Isaac. This time he really took a huge tumble. Perhaps some people would think that Isaac couldn't take the provocation and vomited blood because a bunch of women he just met today had a man of his own. But if you think about it carefully, it's not an exaggeration at all. Indeed, Isaac had once relied on his own methods to move unhindered among the flowers, toying with countless delicate girls in the palm of his hand. However, that was just the man's possessiveness causing mischief. All of them were just for fun and there was not a single time where he was serious. That's why instead of saying that Isaac was dominating a field of flowers, it was more accurate to say that he was capable of dominating a field of flowers. On the other hand, Isaac, who had been fooling around all this while, was attracted to Sylph after meeting her in Silveria World Institute. Not only did she manage to reach the 8th order before the age of 20, she also dominated the entire Silveria World Institute for a few years. She was the princess who was crowned as the strongest student in the academy. She was simply too outstanding. Her appearance alone was the most beautiful Isaac had ever seen in his life. Her cold aura that came from her bones touched the hearts of all the men and women in the Spalier World Academy, including Isaac. On the day he met Sylph, Isaac admitted that it was the first time he was moved by a woman. Plus, Sylph was the daughter of the Ailu Empire's emperor, Kite. Her status was higher than Isaac's. With his possessiveness, how could he not pursue Sylph? It was a pity that Sylph's coldness was genuine. Even though it was fatally attractive to men, it wasn't something they could take advantage of. In the end, Isaac didn't even have the chance to talk to Sylph, even though both of them were in the same academy and were the leaders of one of the 12 strongest factions in the Spalier World Academy. This made Isaac, who thought he was invincible when it came to chasing after women, felt defeated. Fortunately, Isaac wasn't the only one who got snubbed like this. Sylph wasn't the only one who treated Isaac the same way. Even when she spoke to Jaffer and Kaya, she was cold and emotionless. This made Isaac feel a lot better. However, one day Isaac received a piece of news while he was dreaming about having Sylph by his side. Sylph was engaged. She was engaged to a newbie who enrolled in the Spalier World Academy less than 3 months ago. This newbie, who only enrolled in the Spalier World Academy for less than 3 months, managed to make it to the top 5 in the rankings. Even Prince Jaffer of the Baruba Empire could only fight him to a draw. This newbie had done what Isaac couldn't even do after exhausting all his efforts over the past few years. The day he got the news, Isaac smashed everything he could find in the Emerald Tower. He even vented his anger on a few members of the Emerald Tower who came to check out the situation by kicking them out of the Emerald Tower. He hated Wu Yan to the core. However, this newbie, who had no background, no status, not only did he steal Sylph from Isaac, but he also easily defeated Jaffer and Kaya, becoming the strongest student in history. Isaac didn't have the guts to seek revenge. Not to mention, this newbie was the fiancé of the Ailu Empire's royal princess. Isaac didn't dare to offend this newbie, so he could only swallow his grievances. Under such circumstances, Isaac found out that all the girls who could compete with Sylph, or even surpass her, had become Wu Yan's women. It's easy to imagine how much of a shock Isaac felt. On top of that, Kurumi used such a blatant method to tell Isaac what kind of relationship the woman he wanted had with the man he hated the most. Isaac only coughed up blood and didn't die. That's already a testament to his mental fortitude. So, as I said from the beginning, this Isaac is a tragedy. Kurumi. Kotori rolled her eyes when she realized Kurumi was trying to provoke Isaac. You're really bad to the core. Era. Kurumi smiled knowingly. Pity? No. Kotori's pretty face flashed a sinister smile. Very good. In just a few words, Kotori and Kurumi's impression of Isaac was on the verge of being revealed. This made Toka, Meijio and Yoshino very confused. Only Origami glanced at Isaac, who was lying on the ground and vomiting blood and fainted, and said without any ripples. What should we do with this person? Well. Kotori turned around and walked inside without looking back. You can decide for yourselves. Hearing this, the group of girls looked at each other. In the end, they all chose to turn around silently. Meijio even closed the door, leaving Isaac, who had fainted and vomited blood, lying on the cold ground alone. His figure was abnormally sad. So what if he's surrounded by a field of flowers? In the end, he couldn't get what he wanted the most. That's the most tragic part. While all kinds of disputes were going on in the royal palace of the Baruba Empire, an unknown scene was playing out in a desolate city about 8,000 meters away. It was a scene playing out in a courtyard at the center of the city. There were two figures, one standing and one kneeling. The standing figure had his back to the kneeling figure. The kneeling figure seemed to be saying something, causing the standing figure's eyes to light up. It wasn't until the kneeling figure finished speaking that the standing figure turned around and looked at the person kneeling in front of him. He let out a thunderous voice filled with oppression. Is what you said true? I wouldn't dare lie. The kneeling figure said in fear. This humble one is telling the truth. Very good. The figure standing there grinned. It seemed like he was smiling, but it was a sneer. The Baruba Empire's guardian isn't in the capital. Even the heavens are protecting us beastmen. With such a short sentence, the identity of this person became clear. He claimed to be a beastman. A demonic beast. Magical beasts, on the other hand, would only shed their beastly body and transform into human form after advancing to the demigod level. In that case, the identity of this person was obvious. He was the demonic beast king who led the attack on the Baruba Empire. Since this person was the demonic beast king who led the attack on the Baruba Empire, the identity of the kneeling figure was obvious. A traitor. Through some unknown means, he found out that the Baruba Empire's demigod guardian wasn't in the capital and leaked the information to the beast king. Now the Baruba Empire is in real danger. That traitor is a traitor. The figure standing there disappeared without a sound. Tomorrow, I will personally annihilate the Baruba Empire's imperial city. Such a sentence disappeared along with the sound of the wind, making the storm in the desert seem even more violent. It was like a warning. A warning of tomorrow's bloody storm. R 1152. Chapter 1937. The next day. When the scorching sunlight poured down and once again visited the monotonous desert with only one color, the chilliness of the night almost instantly disappeared without a trace. All the heat that belonged to the desert filled the entire desert, causing the air to slightly distort. If someone were to walk in this desert, their vision would be distorted as well. The Baruba Empire's capital city, located between the two towering mountains, welcomed new guards. They replaced the guards who had been guarding the city for an entire night. The guard in charge of the shift was a middle-aged warrior in his 30s or 40s. He was clad in sturdy armor. As soon as he led the guards to the top of the city walls, the middle-aged warrior called out to a bare-chested burly man who seemed to be in charge of the guards. Hey, buddy. It's time to change shifts. You're here? The burly man withdrew his gaze from the distance and looked at the middle-aged warrior. There was a trace of dissatisfaction on his face. You're half an hour late today. Well, it's only half an hour. I'm not sleeping in. The middle-aged warrior waved his hand casually. I could have made it in time. Who knew there would be some strange rumors in the city this morning? I was intrigued. By the time I snapped out of it, I was already late. Strange rumors? The burly man asked curiously. What rumors? Rumor. There are two rumors. The middle-aged warrior didn't try to hide it. He held up two fingers. First, it is said that when the palace servants were patrolling, they accidentally overheard some of the higher-ups saying that the little girls who entered the palace yesterday seemed to have tripped them up and injured all the higher-ups in front of His Majesty. Bah! The burly man spat out a mouthful of saliva with a face full of disdain and said contemptuously. A group of girls injured all the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire? You believe that? Rumor. That's why I said it was a rumor. The middle-aged warrior huffed. That group of lasses should be the lass who boarded that strangely shaped airship into the city yesterday and appeared at the floating plaza with a large group of scantily clad women, right? That's right. That's right. The brawny man nodded. I was also at the floating plaza at that time, so I saw it very clearly. Those scantily clad women are really strange. The middle-aged warrior frowned. It's not like our Baruba Empire doesn't have bolder and more flamboyant outfits. But it seems like they've been staying in the city since yesterday. I heard that there's even an area in the city that's been set aside for them. Why? It's indeed a little strange. It's just a group of women who haven't even reached adulthood yet. Why would they specially empty an area for them to live in? Couldn't he just make some arrangements? Was there something special about them? The burly man pondered for a moment before speaking. What's the second rumor? The second rumor is a bit like that. The middle-aged warrior said sneakily. I heard that this morning, there were servants in the palace who found an unconscious man lying in a pool of blood in the resting area provided for distinguished guests. Moreover, that man seems to be the young patriarch of the Emoma family. You mean that Isaac? The brawny man said in surprise. Why would he be in the resting area and lying unconscious in a pool of blood? Who knows? The middle-aged warrior gloated. I heard that the young patriarch often flirts with women. Perhaps he took a fancy to one of them and went to flirt with her at night. In the end, he ran into a nail and was taught a lesson. This time, the brawny man believed him. That's true. The resting area of the palace is basically filled with people with great backgrounds. This Isaac must have offended some royal family member and was left there for an entire night. Because I was interested in this, I ended up arguing with someone in the city and forgot about the time. The middle-aged warrior chuckled. It's not too late. Let's change shifts now. All right. The brawny man jumped down from his high vantage point and shouted at the guards who were still on alert. Change shifts. Everyone returned to the city to rest. Yes. Only then did the guards relax. One by one they twisted their stiff bodies and rushed back to the city noisily. Amidst the noise, most of the conversations were like this. Sai, I don't know when these days of waking up to guard the city and going to sleep after guarding the city will end. I hope His Majesty and the others can quickly find a way to deal with the magical beasts and set us free. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. I've already decided. After repelling the magical beasts, I'll rush back to my hometown and get married. Go back to your hometown and get married? That's right. Even though she's the girl my parents picked for me, I heard that she's gentle and virtuous. She's very lively. My wife has been pregnant for almost 10 months. I reckon she'll give birth after repelling the magical beasts. I've also decided. After the war with the magical beasts, I'll retire and stop cultivating. I'll just live an ordinary life. If Wu Yan was present and heard the conversation of the guards, he would definitely fall off the city wall. Go back to his hometown and get married? His child is about to be born? Retire and stop cultivating? F***ck, these were all death flags. If they raise death flags now, even if the guards aren't the ones who will die, they'll still die, right? Could these pitiful defenders really survive the war between the humans and the magical beasts? Facts have proven that even in the Spalier world, death flags are heaven-defying. Rumble. Alim, when the city guards who had been guarding the city wall for a whole night were about to walk off the city wall, a series of tremors and quakes gradually came into effect, causing their footsteps and faces to freeze at the same time. Roar. 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 The air that was distorted by the scorching sunlight had turned into waves of air amidst the familiar roars. It swept across the desert like tornadoes, rolling up yellow sand and gradually filling the air with a sandstorm. On the horizon far away from the royal city of the Baruba Empire, the desert became chaotic. Sand, dust, and smoke rolled up like a dense fog. Listening to the roars in the air, feeling the vibrations in the air and the ground, and looking at the dust and smoke in the distance in front of Royal City, the city guards finally thought of something and looked at the horizon in front of the city. Then the expressions of the city guards changed. He saw a large group of densely packed magical beasts that were charging over like mad bulls. They were roaring as they struggled to move their limbs that were constantly sinking into the yellow sand. They were charging over in a frenzy. That was not all. In the sky, a swarm of flying magical beasts that looked like locusts were also braving the heavy sandstorm and storm to stabilize their bodies, flying over amidst their inherent roars. From the looks of it, these flying magical beasts would probably reach the skies above the capital in another 10 minutes. Thus the city guards were in an uproar. The magical beasts are attacking. The middle-aged warrior and the burly man finally reacted and yelled in unison. Don't panic. Get into formation. Prepare to defend the city. Hearing that, the city guards calmed down and immediately formed rows of troops, spreading out on the city walls. The warriors raised the bows in their hands, while the spellcasters gripped their magic staffs tightly. They were fully focused, preparing to face the magical beast army head-on. It wasn't as if the Baruba Empire hadn't been attacked by the magical beast army over the past few days. The Baruba Empire had taken advantage of the terrain and the boundaries to fight against the magical beasts, forcing them to retreat. Therefore, after the initial panic, the city guards had completely calmed down and were prepared to carry out the impregnable defense as usual, repelling the attacking magical beasts once again. If the magical beasts continued to attack as usual, then with all kinds of disadvantages, they would return empty-handed in the end. However, today was destined to break the deadlock. Swoosh. Before the magical beast army reached the attack range of the city defenders, a loud sound of something tearing through the air attracted the attention of all the city defenders. When the city guards saw the source of the sound, they were all dumbfounded. R1152. Chapter 1938. Whoosh. With a piercing sound, a black shadow broke through the clouds of flying magical beasts with the speed of a meteor, stopping in the air above the Baruba Empire's capital. Just like that, it floated there looking down. The black shadow was, in fact, a human silhouette. It was because of this human silhouette floating in the air, looking down at the Baruba Empire's capital, that the city guards were stunned. In the Spalier world, there were only two kinds of people who could fly. The first kind were warriors and magicians who trained in magic that allowed them to float or fly. The other kind were those who broke through the barrier of the 9th rank and reached the demigod rank. Apart from these two types of existences, other people would have to rely on tools, miraculous medicines, special armaments, and other external objects such as airships. Otherwise, they would only be able to achieve similar feats. For example, powerhouses of the 8th and 9th order could rely on micromanipulation of their do chi and mana to allow themselves to hover in the air, achieving a feat similar to flying or hovering. However, in the end it was only similar and there was no way to maintain it for a long time, nor could it be used flexibly. It would even consume a large amount of do chi and mana. Therefore, in the Spalier world, the only ones who could truly float or fly were those who had cultivated techniques or spells with such effects, or were demigod-level powerhouses. Now, seeing a person hovering in the air so stably, the guards who were at least rank 7 could be sure that he was truly hovering and flying, and not using any similar means. Therefore, the person hovering in the air was either a demigod or a demigod, who had practiced some sort of technique or magic that had the effect of hovering or flying. The city guards hoped that it was the former and not the latter. The other party had just brazenly flown out of a large swarm of flying magical beasts like a swarm of locusts. Since the flying magical beasts didn't attack him and even let him pass, it meant that he wasn't on their side. He was an enemy. And if this enemy was a demigod rank powerhouse, then the city guards could be certain. Today, the Baruba Empire's capital would definitely face an unprecedented crisis. Unfortunately, while the city guards were still staring at the sky in a daze, Lin Fan's expression changed drastically. The figure floating in the air mercilessly extinguished the hope in their hearts. The figure floating in the air raised one of his hands, and a black radiance that looked like a corrosive gas surged out and gradually condensed. Without even saying a word, the figure floating in the air threw down his hand as if he was throwing something. The corrosive gas-like black radiance immediately shot down from the sky like a waterfall. Whoosh! The black waterfall rubbed against the air like a meteorite that broke through the atmosphere. Not long after, it landed on the rippling barrier around the Baruba Empire's capital. Boom! Following a thunderous sound, a violent shockwave swept out from where the black waterfall landed, spreading in all directions. Peng! The barrier of the Baruba Empire that could withstand the attacks of hundreds of Type 8 powerhouses could not even hold out for a second, as it shattered with a loud crack. Following that, the black waterfall continued to descend on the Baruba Empire's capital without slowing down. Peng! Like an atomic explosion, the Baruba Empire's capital was engulfed in a violent shockwave and a thick cloud of dust. Screams and cries of panic rang out from within the capital. When the shockwave and dust dissipated, the Baruba Empire's capital was once again exposed to the sunlight. However, at that very moment, the city that was said to be the most sturdy and fortress-like had undergone a great change. The walls that were covered with spikes like a hedgehog piled up on the ground like broken tiles. The buildings that were originally intact completely collapsed like dilapidated houses, gradually becoming history amidst the smoke and fire. Even half of the palace was blown away. It was slanted and looked like it could collapse at any time. This was not the worst. The worst was none other than the city guards in Royal City. Some of these people had already been buried under the rubble, some were stacked together and fell to the ground like garbage, some were still letting out painful groans and some were simply motionless, their lives unknown. The scene was like hell. Hong. Not long after, the palace collapsed as well. However, before that, a few figures flew out from within and avoided the collapsed palace. They landed on the ground in a scattered manner and looked at the scene around them. Some of the figures began to tremble all over. These people were naturally the only ones who had the ability to protect themselves from this terrifying attack. They were the Stage 9 powerhouses: Gida, Kluan, Will, Jebi, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino. Apart from these 10 people, no one else was unharmed. Even Jafar had been carried out of the palace by Gida. However, Jafar was also heavily injured and had fainted. As for the Type 9 powerhouses who had the ability to protect themselves, no matter how bewildered they were, when they saw the hellish scenes in the city, all their emotions were suppressed. Gida, Kuluan, Will and Gubai all turned pale. King City. Kuluan seemed to have lost his soul. His eyes were unfocused and his limbs trembled. King City has been destroyed. Will and Gubai's faces were also filled with bewilderment and helplessness. Everything happened too quickly and simply didn't give people the chance to react. A second ago, everyone was still doing their own things in the palace. The next moment they were greeted with a world-destroying attack. If it wasn't for the fact that the group of 9th-level powerhouses all sensed a trace of danger and promptly raised their defensive measures, they absolutely wouldn't have come out unscathed. Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami as well as Yoshino, who couldn't bear to watch this hellish scene, all looked towards Kotori. Just as they were about to say something, they noticed that Kotori was looking at the sky solemnly. Their faces turned cold as they looked up. Only then did they notice something. In the sky, a person was floating in the air. It was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He was wearing a beast hide with long blood-red hair that reached his waist. Not only did he have a pair of blood-red wings on his back, he also had a long tail with a hook. At a glance, it was actually a scorpion tail. This man with a pair of blood-red wings and a scorpion tail, as well as a head full of blood-red hair, floated in the air above the capital of the Baruba Empire, looking down at the Type 9 powerhouses below with a disdainful look. His voice rang out like thunder. "Humans, your time of death has come." Hearing this, Gida and Kotori felt a chill run down their spines. To be able to call Gida and Kotori humans, to be able to float in the air and destroy the Baruba Empire's capital with a wave of his hand, there was no need to guess who this person was. "It's you." Gida stared at the red-haired man. "Beast King. To be able to survive my attack, humans, you have the right to know my name." The red-haired man laughed disdainfully. "Xiaming. This is the name given to me by the great beast god." "Xiaming." Gida grit his teeth as he hugged the unconscious Jafar. He suppressed the anger in his heart as he spoke coldly. "To think that you would come out personally. Aren't you afraid that the guardian of my Baruba Empire will turn you into ashes?" "Turn me into ashes?" Xiaming laughed mockingly. "Let's not talk about whether the guardian of your Baruba Empire has the ability to turn me into ashes. Human, why don't you get your guardian to come out and spar with me?" Gida still wanted to bluff, but he was suppressed by Origami's calm words. There's no point in saying anything more. Since the other party came out personally, he must have known that the guardian isn't in the capital. Gida, Kuluan, Weir and Jebi's heart sank. Kotori glanced at the four of them, her casual words causing their hearts to tremble. "You have failed in your duties." Chapter 1939. Dereliction of duty. Indeed, dereliction of duty. As mentioned earlier, the betrayers were experts who escaped from the destroyed cities of the Baruba Empire and surrendered to Dark Scorpion in an attempt to save their own lives. In the end, they snuck into the capital and betrayed the human race to work for the magical beasts. These traitors who came from other cities could only be ordinary cultivators who were born and developed in this city, or they could only be people like me, Lena, who were sent by the three great families to manage this city. Even if the ordinary cultivators snuck into the capital, they wouldn't be able to do anything without background, status, or identity. That was why the traitors from the three major families were the ones they needed to be wary of. Yesterday, the upper echelons in the palace hall were all people with extremely high status and authority in the three major clans. People like them couldn't be sent to other cities. Not only would it seem like they were being exiled, it would also be a waste of their talents. That was why Coterie made everything clear in front of so many upper echelons. There were two reasons for doing so. Firstly, it was impossible for these high-ranking officials to be traitors since they were not transferred from other cities. Secondly, the traitors were mostly from the three major clans, and their identities and numbers were unknown. It was impossible to rely on a group of girls or a limited number of people like Gita to secretly find them. They could only rely on these high-ranking officials to act together. That way it would be much more efficient to find the traitors. They had to get rid of the tumors as soon as possible. Of course, by revealing such important information in front of so many people, the chances of the news being leaked would be much greater. At that time it would cause even more trouble. But in the end, after careful consideration, Coterie decided to reveal it. After all, if she didn't do this, it would be hard to find the hidden threats, and sooner or later, the Baruba Empire would be dealt a heavy blow. She believed that Gita understood this as well. That was why Coterie told Gita everything that had happened. She also had the intention of letting Gita clean up the mess himself. And the facts proved that Gita was indeed the emperor of the Baruba Empire. Gita had already guessed the reason why Coterie had revealed the information so openly. That was why he solemnly ordered that no one was to reveal what they heard in the hall to anyone. After leaving the hall, he ordered his personal guards to keep an eye on the higher-ups. He had to keep all the secrets in the mouths of the higher-ups. However, since Xiaming had personally taken action, it proved that there was still a flaw in Guda's secret arrangements and the news was lost. That was why Coterie said that she had failed in her duty. Gita naturally knew what Coterie meant. For a moment he was filled with self-blame and guilt. That's not right. Suddenly, Kluan seemed to have realized something. The higher-ups who attended the meeting yesterday were all secretly monitored by His Majesty's personal guards. If they leaked the information, the personal guards would definitely report it to His Majesty. That's right. Will pointed at the group of girls and shouted angrily. The only people who aren't being watched by the guards are you. As soon as these words came out, the air immediately filled with an oppressive feeling. Era. There was a smile on Kurumi's face, but there was no smile in her eyes. Are you suspecting us? Then can you prove that you are innocent? Gubai said coldly. You're the only ones who aren't being watched. Toka and Meijio, who were rather angry at being suspected, wanted to say something, but were stopped by Origami and Kurumi. There's no need to argue with them. Coterie didn't even look at Gita, Kaluan, Will and Gubai. Instead she explained to Toka and Meijio. Let them be. Our goal is only Xiaming. The survival of the Baruba Empire has nothing to do with us. You. Kaluan, Will and Gubai glared angrily at the group of girls. Before they could say anything, Gita stood up with Jafar in his arms. He lifted his head and looked at Xiaming, who was watching them fight amongst themselves with interest. He spoke in a deep voice. How do you know that the Guardian isn't in the capital? You want to know. The corners of Xiaming's mouth curled up. There's no harm in telling you. Although I don't know who leaked the news, the human who brought the news to me said that he has a good friend who seems to be working for some king. Last night he got drunk with him and said that the guardian deity is not in King City. At this moment everyone understood. The one who leaked the information wasn't the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire who were being watched by the guards. Instead it was someone in the guards. Perhaps Gita didn't expect that it was the guards he sent to spy on the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire who leaked the information. Perhaps this was the so-called impossible to guard against situation. Who leaked the information to you? Kluan didn't apologize to the group of girls who were suspected by them. Instead, the veins on his forehead bulged and he growled. I'm going to tear that traitor into pieces. You want to kill the human who brought the information to me? Xiaming waved his arm as though he wasn't interested. Then you can search the rubble around you. Maybe you can find it. Wah! Everyone sucked in a cold breath. At Xiaming's words, they finally remembered that the traitors were all still in the capital. In other words, Xiaming had attacked them as well. You. Will clenched his fists. Didn't you accept the traitors' surrender? So, didn't I give them a chance to live? Xiaming nodded matter-of-factly. As long as they live, I won't kill them. Although I just made the decision. Despicable. Gubai cursed without hesitation. As expected, magical beasts can't tolerate humans. That's not necessarily true. Xiaming laughed out loud. If the great Lord Beast God decides to let the humans live, we will still restrain ourselves a little and keep the humans as livestock instead of killing them all. Bastard. This time even Guda bellowed. The Guardian won't let you go. You'd better take care of yourselves first. Xiaming sneered and spread his arms. Come, my brethren. Roar. Roar. Gore. The charging magical beast army finally arrived at the scene. They trampled mercilessly on the rubble of the city walls, charged into the ruined capital, and pounced on the fallen city guards. Even though Xiaming said that he wouldn't kill the traitors as long as they survived, he only said that he wouldn't kill them and didn't say that he wouldn't allow the magical beast to kill them. If he allowed the magical beast army to go on a killing spree, none of the dying humans would survive, right? Swish. All of a sudden, in one of the corners of the capital, a series of ear-piercing sounds echoed. The magical beast army that pounced on the city guards came to a halt and looked over. Not far away, streams of light flew out from the rubble. The streams of light were surrounded by a protective shield made of green crystals. That was the Chitori domain at will. These streams of light were none other than the 5,000 Misaka sisters. The Misaka sisters who cast the Chitori domain at will all flew over and landed behind Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, and Yoshino. Their identical appearances and strange outfits stunned Xiaming and surprised Guda and the others. That was because these Misaka sisters who could only exert the strength of a level 8 expert were also unscathed. This was something that even the peak level 8 powerhouses in the capital couldn't do. There are actually so many humans who are unscathed, and they're as weak as ants? Xiaming frowned for a moment, but his expression soon relaxed. It's good too. My brethren can have some fun too. On the other hand, Guda, Kaluan, Will and Jebi were overjoyed. With 5,000 level 8 powerhouses around, they could at least stop the magical beast army and protect the city guards of the Baruba Empire. However, Guda and the others' plan was too perfect. Origami's cold words sent them into the abyss. Everyone returned to Fraxinus. Gather and await orders. Guda, Kaluan, Will and Jebi were stunned. Chapter 1940. Compared to the endless horde of magical beasts, if 5,000 Misaka sisters were thrown into the horde of magical beasts, they would be drowned by the saliva of each magical beast. It would seem that the Misaka sisters would not be of much use. However, numbers were not everything. Even though there were only 5,000 Misaka sisters, which was nothing compared to the horde of magical beasts, each of them could unleash the power of a level 8 magical beast. If one were to count carefully, even though the magical beast horde was innumerable, there were only 3,000 to 4,000 level 8 magical beasts, which was even fewer than the Misaka sisters. As mentioned earlier, a level 7 powerhouse could easily stop a group of 10,000 level 5 powerhouses. In terms of level 8 powerhouses, a level 8 powerhouse could also stop a group of 10,000 level 6 powerhouses. Therefore, if the 5,000 Misaka sisters were to join the battle, the magical beast horde would definitely be stopped if the level 9 magical beasts didn't join the battle. At that time, the defenders of the Baruba Empire would have enough time to wait for reinforcements and retreat from the battlefield. Even though the Baruba Empire's capital had been destroyed, as long as there were still people who could fight, the Baruba Empire would not be destroyed. At least that was what Guda, Kaluan, Will and Jebi planned to do. However, Guda's group of 4 was completely dumbfounded by Origami's order. Everyone returned to Fraxinus and await orders? What was the meaning of this? This question didn't last long before Guda and the others came to their senses and understood the meaning of the Origami phrase. Origami's meaning was very simple. She wanted the Misaka sisters to retreat. Wait. Kulun was the first to shout. We can't retreat. Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko and Shiba ignored Kulun's shout. Origami was the only one who looked at Kulun with a calm gaze. The calm expression in her blue eyes made Kulun's heart skip a beat. Origami's words were also very simple. Why? Why? Before Kulun could say anything, Will shouted impatiently. Isn't that obvious? If you retreat, what will happen to the survivors in the city? Survivors from King City? Origami's face was calm, but every word he said struck a chord in the hearts of the Baruba Empire's leaders. What does that have to do with us? What do you mean by that? Gubai shouted furiously. Are you trying to run away? As soon as Gubai's voice fell, the group of girls suddenly turned their heads and stared at Gubai. Whether it was Kotori and Origami, Toka and Meijio or the four Bakufu, all of them made Gubai's body tremble. Kurumi's eyes were filled with killing intent and hostility, causing Gubai's pupils to shrink and his body to tense up. Perhaps you high and mighty people have gotten used to giving orders, or perhaps the Baruba Empire has already treated women as servants. Kotori spoke in an emotionless voice. However, I must remind you that we are not your servants, but the lifesavers that you begged to stay behind. Only then did Kulun, Will and Gubai realize that their tone just now was too much like an order. They were speechless. However, it was as Kotori had said. The three of them were Type 9 powerhouses and were used to giving orders. Due to the Baruba Empire's patriarchal culture, they had gotten used to seeing women as lower than themselves. Originally, Kulun, Will and Gubai wouldn't have used such a tone in front of people of similar status. But the strange thing was that these girls were really too young, not giving off the feeling of being unfathomable powerhouses of the ninth step. Thus, out of habit, Kulun, Will and Jebi exposed their deep-rooted way of doing things. But you guys can't just retreat like that. Kulun hurriedly spoke up. Aren't we on the same side? Era. Kwang San lightly covered the corner of her mouth. Her smile was slightly sinister. First you suspected us, then you gave us orders. Now that we're in danger, you still dare to say that we're on the same side? I didn't expect the Type 9 powerhouses of the Baruba Empire to be so thick-skinned. Kulun, Will and Gubai wanted to say something, but before they could, Kotori waved her hand. I've said it before, the Baruba Empire's survival has nothing to do with us. Kotori declared without mercy. The moment you started suspecting us, our partnership was already over. Since you never thought of respecting us, there is no need for us to protect you. The Baruba Empire brought this upon itself. You have no one to blame but yourself. Kulun, Will and Gubai's minds went blank and they lost all their thoughts. Cooperation was over? No need to protect them? In other words, these people are not going to make a move? You can't do this. Gubai yelled at the top of his lungs. If the Baruba Empire is destroyed, the humans will lose a huge portion of their strength. How are we going to deal with the magical beast army then? Without the Beast King, the magical beast army will disband on its own. Origami said indifferently, her words shocking Kulun, Will and Gubai. And the Beast King will be killed by us. You? Will let out a question that was no different from mocking them. That was to be expected. Xiaming was a pseudo-demigod powerhouse. Although he wasn't a true demigod, he wasn't someone 5 or 6 Type 9 powerhouses could deal with. Now the girls were saying that they would be the ones to kill Xiaming. Wasn't that a joke? Of course, it didn't matter if Kulun, Will or Jebi wanted to laugh at the girls. Their previous actions had made the girls give up on the idea of saving the Baruba Empire. Origami continued to give orders. Everyone retreat. The Misaka sisters didn't say anything. Instead, they activated their thrusters and flew toward the floating plaza where Fraxinus was parked. Wait. Kulun, Will and Jebi stared at the Misaka sisters who were retreating from the scene angrily. At that moment, Gada, who had been silent all this time, sighed. Indeed, this is the Baruba Empire's own fault. I was the one who begged you to stay, yet you were treated like this. I even allowed the news to leak. I hesitated when others suspected you and I didn't choose to trust you. I've long since failed as an emperor. Gada stood up as he said this. His eyes were filled with determination. Now that things have come to this, I can't thank you enough for your willingness to stop the Beast King. We will take care of the magical beast army ourselves. Your Majesty. Kulun, Will and Gubai wanted to say something, But Guda had made up his mind. You have to bear the consequences of your own actions. Have you lost even this little bit of dignity? Kuluan, Will and Gubai's faces froze. They lowered their heads and fell silent. Then they silently stood by Guda's side and cast their gazes towards the endless horde of magical beasts ahead. Father. Jaffar's weak voice sounded from Guda's arms. He struggled out of Guda's embrace and stood up. Leave the people in the city to me. You can focus on the magical beast army. Only then did Guda, Kuluan, Will and Gubai's expressions become much better. Are you done? In midair, Xiaming looked down at the group of people below. You can continue if you're not done. I don't mind waiting a little longer. After all, it's not fun to end it too early, is it? Although Xiaming said that, he gently waved his hand. Immediately, a few blurs flashed through the air and landed on the ground, appearing before Guda and the other three. They were 7 magical beasts that were over 3 meters tall and as large as buildings. 7 magical beasts of the 9th level. Roar. The roars of the 7 Class 9 magical beasts mixed together, turning into a sound wave that blew through the surroundings. It made Guda, Kuluan, Will and Gubai become extremely stern. After all, not only did they have to deal with an endless horde of magical beasts, but they also had to deal with 7 magical beasts of the 9th level. R1152. Chapter 1941. Leaving aside how Guda, Kuluan, Will and Jebi were going to fend off the 7 level 9 magical beasts and the entire magical beast army, Xiaming raised his eyes and glanced at the retreating Misaka sisters. He didn't chase after them. Instead, he lowered his gaze and looked at the group of girls standing on the ground. He raised his eyebrows. What? Aren't you going to help them? Xiaming pretended to be kind and asked. Facing 7 Class 9 magical beasts and an entire magical beast army at the same time, even if the 4 humans are Class 9 powerhouses, it's still very dangerous. Are you done? Kodori smiled and said. You can continue if you're not done. We don't mind waiting for you for a while. After all. Prong-san laughed along with him. It won't be fun if it ends too early, right? The smile on Xiaming's face gradually disappeared when he heard the girls use the exact words he had said not long ago. He looked at the girls below with a cold glint in his eyes. Humans, it's not a good choice to anger me. Regardless of whether we anger you or not, you don't intend to let any human life go, do you? Origami said in a colder tone than Xiaming. Since we're going to die anyway, why don't you let others anger you? Xiaming pondered for a moment before he nodded. That's true. Since I intend to kill you all, I'll kill you all. Since I intend to anger you, it's nothing. Humans, do you need me to give you some time to vent? Kodori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino and the other girls looked at each other and laughed in unison. No need. As soon as he finished speaking, a burst of dazzling light burst out from the girls' bodies. The sudden glare made Xiaming frown. He took a step back and dodged the glare that was aimed at his eyes. He turned his head and looked at the center of the glare. At the center of the blinding light, the appearance of the 6 girls had changed completely. Toka's clothes were made of cloth and metal. She was wearing light armor that looked like a princess's dress. The skirt was made up of an incredible light film, as if it was a crystal that was illuminated by various rays of light from different directions. She was also holding a spike-shaped greatsword in her hand. She looked like a princess. She looked like a heroic knight. The clothes on the 4 bunnies had also changed into raincoats that were green with some white or other colors mixed in with the raincoats. There was a pair of cute bunnies on the hood. She had a bunny tail on her back. She was riding a huge bunny doll. She looked like she walked out of a fairy tale. Kurumi was wearing a black and red gothic princess dress. Her hair was tied into a ponytail and her golden eyes were exposed to the air. She looked both strange and charming and no one could take their eyes off her. Kodori was floating in the air. Her body was surrounded by flames. She looked like she was stepping on a flying flame. Half of her white feather dress was made of flames. A veil wrapped around her body like a fairy's feather dress. She wore a horn ornament on her head. Her red eyes seemed to have flames burning in them. She looked very dreamy. Meijio's tall and perfect figure had long been covered by a gorgeous dress that seemed to be formed from light particles. There was a huge organ floating behind her, and a keyboard that looked like the keys of a piano floated in front of her. She looked like a celebrity who was about to sing, and her entire body shone with a moving radiance. As for Origami, her slender and soft body fully displayed her beauty due to her exposed uniform. She had an X-shaped thruster on her back and a huge cannon in her hand. Although she didn't look as dreamy as the other elven girls, her beauty didn't diminish at all. Looking at the group of girls gradually revealing themselves in the strong light and sensing the powerful spiritual energy or demonic energy around them, Xiaming was stunned for a moment and stood up in surprise. "You're not humans?" This sentence was naturally directed at the elven girls other than Origami. It was clear that Dark Scorpion, who couldn't detect any trace of human scent from the elven girls after they unleashed their powers, was able to see through their true identities with the keen sense of smell of magical beasts. However, the elven girls didn't care about that at all. Whoosh. At that moment, apart from Meijio, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Origami, and the huge rabbit plushie, the 5 of them split up and rushed towards Dark Scorpion, who was floating in the air. Xiaming snorted coldly when he saw that the group of girls had taken the initiative to attack. He raised his hand and pointed. 5 pitch-black beams of light shot out from his hand. They tore through space and shot towards the group of girls. The group of girls immediately flew into the sky together, and their bodies were abnormally agile as they danced in the air. In the next moment, the pitch-black beam of light passed through the place where the group of girls had been, but with a turn, it continued to chase after the group of girls. From those pitch-black light beams, the group of girls felt an extremely threatening power, and immediately they felt some pressure in their hearts. Humph. Kotori stepped on flames and spun. She dodged the pitch-black beams with an acrobatic flying maneuver. It doesn't matter how powerful it is. It's useless if it can't hit. "Miss Origami," Kurong-san shouted with a serious face as she retreated. "You're the fastest. We'll be responsible for diverting his attacks. You find an opportunity to attack." Origami didn't say anything. She just nodded indifferently. Her body tensed up, and under the effect of the thrusters on her back, she shot towards Xiaming again. "Watch me." On the ground below, Meijio, who was standing in front of a huge pipe organ, began to gently slide her slender fingers on the keyboard of light around her body. She played a smooth and beautiful tune. The Army Destroyer Songstress, Gabjapol, Rondo. All of a sudden, a series of cylindrical objects that resembled those on a pipe organ extended out of space. The front end of the cylindrical objects was aimed directly at Dark Scorpion, and invisible sound waves rippled through the air as Meijio played the zither. Xiaming didn't seem to have expected this type of attack. He was caught off guard and didn't react in time, allowing the sound waves of the rondo to pass through his body. Boom. As if a heavy mountain was pressing down on him, Xiaming, who was suspended in the air, tilted his body and couldn't move for a moment. Meijio's rondo was supposed to be an offensive move, but when used on Dark Scorpion, it became a restraining move. From this, one could see how powerful a pseudo-demigod powerhouse was. It's not over yet. However, Meijio's real goal wasn't to attack Xiaming. She crossed her hands and played on the keyboard in front of her. The smooth and beautiful tune suddenly had a hint of bravery. March of the Destroyer Songstress. The sound waves reverberated again. This time it didn't affect Xiaming. Instead, it affected the girls, causing a powerful force to surge out of their bodies. Even their spiritual power was strengthened. The March of the Army Destroyer Songstress has the effect of enhancing all aspects of the target's abilities. Originally, Meijio couldn't play 2 different pieces of music at the same time, but ever since she broke through to the 9th level, Meijio's usage of the Army Destroyer Song Girl had also increased by several levels. Now she could play 2 pieces of music at the same time, and even 3 was no problem. Xiaming's expression turned cold when he saw that the girl's speed, movements, and strength had increased significantly. He suddenly straightened his body. Bang! It was just a simple movement of straightening his body, but the sound waves of the rondo, which pressed down on Xiaming like a heavy mountain, were immediately blown up in a muffled sound. Immediately afterward, Xiaming waved his hand and the surrounding space twisted slightly. A terrifying force brewed within. Chapter 1942. In that instant, all the young ladies felt a sense of crisis bursting out from the bottom of their hearts. Even Origami, who was charging straight at Dark Scorpion, slowed down significantly. Her expression, which rarely showed any emotions in the past, changed slightly. Just as Origami was hesitating if he should abandon charge, A petite figure suddenly appeared in front of Origami, riding on a gigantic rabbit plushie. It was none other than Yoshino and the angel, who had transformed into Yoshino, the Tsadkiel puppet. Defense. Leave it to me. Yoshino inserted her hand into the back of Yoshino, who had transformed into the Tsadkiel puppet, as though inserting her hand into an electric wire. A rare look of determination appeared on her delicate, adorable face. I'll leave it to you, Miss Origami. Origami stared fixedly at the determination on Yoshino's petite face, which usually wore a timid expression. She didn't say a word, but the thruster engine on her back was suddenly activated to the maximum power, transforming her into a stream of light that flashed across the sky and shot toward Dark Scorpion. Looking at the scene of Origami dashing toward him, Dark Scorpion let out a snort of laughter as though he couldn't care less. Meanwhile, the distorted space around them fluctuated more violently. As Dark Scorpion spread open his palm and pointed his fingers at Origami, an unusually viscous black mist surged out of the distorted space, swirled slightly and coalesced into a strange black ghost claw. In a whoosh sound, the ghost claw streaked across the void and arrived before Origami in a flash. Facing this sudden, swift attack, Origami's expression changed slightly again. However, she didn't choose to retreat. Instead, she turned stern and the thruster on her back increased its thrust. Instead of retreating, she charged forward. As the two of them approached each other, the strange ghost claw also quickly arrived in front of Origami. Origami could even smell the stench and rotting smell coming from it. He believed that in the next second, this terrifying and strange ghost claw would land on Origami's body. At the critical moment, Yoshino finally moved. Tsadkiel. The huge rabbit plushie's eyes glinted in a scarlet glint. It lifted its head and a white beam of light containing an extremely cold temperature blasted out of its mouth. Wherever it passed, the moisture in the air instantly turned into ice particles that fell to the ground. The white beam of light containing an extremely cold temperature flashed across the sky, appearing in front of Origami before the ghost claw that attacked her. It stuck between her and the ghost claw, came to a halt and exploded abruptly. Boom. The white light turned into a cold mist amidst the explosion. In the mist, snowflake-like ice crystals appeared out of thin air and combined together to form a huge hexagonal ice crystal. The ghostly claw landed heavily on the ice crystal, causing a burst of ice shards and sparks. Before the collision between the two could form a barrier, the ice crystal suddenly changed its direction and tilted slightly to the side. The ghost claw collided with the ice crystal in a violent friction. Following the direction of the ice crystal, the ghost claw also changed its direction. It skimmed across the air and shot into the distance, disappearing from sight. At that moment, the ice crystal shattered on its own as though it had completed its mission. Origami rushed to the back of the ice crystal, shuttled through the shattered ice crystal, and continued to charge at Xieming without slowing down. Xieming narrowed his eyes and let out a sneer. He swung his arm and like a cannon, the distorted space erupted with a black radiance that coalesced into a pitch-black beast claw that was even larger than the ghost claw from before. Like a fishing net, the beast claw brought about a strong, corrosive wind that enveloped Origami. Hiya! Facing this attack that was even more ferocious than before, just as Origami was about to react, a delicate shout accompanied by a figure appeared at the side of the huge beast claw. It was none other than Toka, who wielded the spike-shaped sword. Sandalphon. He raised his hand and with a move the angel named Sandalphon slashed down heavily. With the support of its owner's strength and spiritual power, it was like a flash of sword light that landed on the giant beast's claw. Clang. Amidst the loud sound like the ringing of a bell, the shockwave also erupted. The huge beast claw was heavily smashed away by the huge sword, deviating from its trajectory. Following the path of the previous ghost claw, it also shot into the distance, disappearing from the scene. 10 incense was also sent flying by the terrifying rebounding force. She only managed to stabilize herself after drawing a long air wave in the air. Her arm that was holding the sword was faintly numb. So painful. 10 Fragrance's hand that was holding the sword was constantly trembling. Traces of pain also appeared on her beautiful face. Clearly, the reaction force was extremely great. If it were an ordinary person who suffered such an attack, The web between their thumb and forefinger would have split open, right? Humph. Xiaming's expression gradually turned impatient as his attacks were blocked again and again. It was as though he didn't want to continue playing anymore. Gazing at Origami, who was charging toward him, he leaned forward slowly like a wild beast about to pounce on its prey. I don't have time to play with you guys who I don't know what kind of creatures you are. Dark Scorpion stared intently at the Origami as he spoke. With a sudden movement, he disappeared on the spot. I'll get rid of you first. Xiaming's voice was still reverberating through the air when a claw-shaped hand appeared beside Origami without any warning. It was aimed directly at Origami's throat, and it squeezed mercilessly toward her. It was clearly a very ordinary hand. There were no traces of combat aura or mana on it. It gave off a very ordinary feeling. However, Origami did not dare to be careless when she felt the strong wind coming from beside her. Zafkiel, bullet of 7, Zayin. Bang. Swish. Almost at the same time, a shout, a gunshot, and a sound of something breaking through the air sounded in everyone's ears. At the same time, a pitch-black bullet formed entirely from spiritual energy streaked across the air and reached the claw that was pinching Origami's throat at lightning speed. Before it came into contact with the claw, it turned into a transparent pitch-black light barrier that enveloped the claw and its owner. Xiaming seemed to realize that the pitch-black bullet wasn't an ordinary attack. But when he tried to retreat, the transparent pitch-black light barrier had already enveloped him. In an instant, everything enveloped by the transparent pitch-black light barrier, including the space around Xiaming, came to a standstill. No, it wasn't that everything came to a standstill, but that the flow of time in everything came to a complete halt. In the state of time standstill, even a powerful pseudo-demigod like Xiaming couldn't resist time itself. He was completely frozen in the transparent pitch-black light barrier formed by the bullet of 7. Not to mention moving, he couldn't even operate his consciousness. Zafkiel, bullet of 7. Kuang Sen's voice once again reverberated in the air, and the sound of gunfire once again rang out in this space. Immediately, the pitch-black bullet pierced through the air and directly hit Origami's body, causing Origami's dark blue eyes to flash with a bright light. The effect of Kurumi's bullet of 7 was to accelerate the flow of time. While the bullet of 7 was in effect, Origami's time would flow faster. In this case, be it her movement speed or attack speed, there would be a substantial increase. Without hesitation, Origami turned the heavy cannon in her hand and aimed it at Xiaming, who was frozen in the torrent of time. Buzz. The heavy cannon in her hand twisted abruptly. A laser blade protruded from the front end, vibrating repeatedly and letting out an ear-piercing buzzing sound. Chi. Under the effect of Aleph, Origami did not hesitate to swing the heavy cannon with a laser blade in her hand. In a flash of sharp sword light, she heavily slashed the frozen body of Dark Scorpion. Splurt. Amidst the tearing sound, crimson blood spilled from midair, splattering onto the ruins of the Baruba Empire's royal city below. A small rain of blood fell to the ground, forming a small pool of blood. R1152. Chapter 1943. Heaven and earth seemed to have fallen silent at that moment. Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Mikoto, Yoshino, and the other young ladies gazed at the scene in midair. Their expressions froze. Origami wielded the heavy cannon that had transformed into a laser lightsaber. Drops of blood trickled down the blade of the laser lightsaber, but she ignored them completely. Instead, she stared ahead with a grave expression. There, Xiaming lowered his head, extended his arm and grasped the vibrating laser lightsaber's blade. Ignoring the blood flowing from his hand, he lifted his head slowly, revealing a pair of calm, repressed eyes before the group of young ladies. However, what was even more depressing were the words that came out of Xiaming's mouth in the next second. All of you are dead meat. When these words reached the ears of the group of young girls, their hearts fiercely trembled. Swish. At the next moment, a dark shadow launched a sneak attack and lashed at Origami's back. It was Xiaming's barbed tail. Origami's pupils shrunk. The thruster engine on her back vibrated abruptly, propelling her backward. While retreating, she brandished the laser lightsaber in her hand and slashed at the dark shadow that lashed at her. Clang. The loud sound of steel colliding with steel echoed in the sky. The laser lightsaber in Origami's hand slashed at Xiaming's tail. But it was a pity that Origami had used all her strength. The seemingly ferocious attack only caused a collision sound, causing the ferocious barbed tail to pause for a moment. Immediately after, the latter's momentum did not decrease but instead increased. Its speed abruptly increased by 2 to 3 levels. In a flash, it whipped toward Origami's chest. Even though Origami's reaction speed was one of the best among the group of young ladies, she couldn't dodge the attack that was 2 to 3 times faster. All she could do was to hold the laser lightsaber horizontally before her. Clang! Xiaming's tail landed heavily on the laser lightsaber. A crisp sound of weapons clashing resounded. Umph! A tremendous force burst forth from the laser lightsaber. Origami felt as though a heavy mountain had smashed into her. She let out a muffled groan. Her hand that held the lightsaber let out a subtle cracking sound as though her bones were being crushed. Kacha! Then, the laser lightsaber in Origami's hand made a sound. Origami's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly activated the thruster engine. She retreated to a distance away from Xiaming and swept a glance at the laser lightsaber in her hand. On it, shockingly, there was already a crack in it. Origami couldn't help but be astonished. Although the weapon in Origami's hand was not an armament, it was the most advanced equipment developed by the Dem company in the Date battle world. Even the weapon of the world's strongest magician Irene was only at the same level as the one in Origami's hand. In terms of strength, it was definitely comparable to a gold armament. Now the enemy's casual attack had caused a crack to appear on a gold armament. Although the crack wasn't very big, it was still quite shocking for an Origami. Swish! While Origami was still in shock, a sharp sound of something tearing through the air echoed. Along with a strong gust of wind, it rushed toward her. After that, Xiaming's cold and ghastly face was imprinted into Origami's eyes. Die! Xiaming uttered those words lightly, followed by a light punch. Under Origami's gaze, the punch landed on her chest. Tori Willful Field. Activate. At this critical juncture, Origami had no choice but to activate the Tori Willful Field with all her might, allowing the green crystal shield to envelop her body. Bang! But in the face of this light punch, the Tori Willful Field, which should have been able to withstand a full blow from a 9th stage powerhouse, shattered right away. Before Origami could react, the seemingly powerless fist that shattered the Tori Willful Field instantly landed on her body. Bang! In a muffled explosion, Origami felt as though she had been hit by a truck. Before she could even make a sound, she was blasted away like a bullet fired from a barrel. She crashed heavily to the ground, stirring up a cloud of thick dust. Origami, Miss Origami! Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Yoshino, and the other young ladies exclaimed in shock. Kotori raised her arm and a black and red heavy cannon appeared in her hand. Scorching Destroyer, Camel. Cannon, Megiddo. The instant she yelled, scarlet flames coalesced in the Scorching Destroyer, Camel. Cannon, Megiddo. Along with extremely violent heat, it blasted out from the heavy cannon in Kotori's hand and struck Xiaming, who continued to pursue Origami. Boom! The flame beam was only half a meter away from Xiaming. Before it landed on him, it exploded like a sudden clap of thunder, erupting in a deafening explosion. A terrifying wave of flames swept out in midair. The scorching temperature distorted the surrounding air and even the ground trembled violently as though affected by it. However, Kotori didn't relax in the slightest. Even though the Scorching Destroyer, Camel, Cannon, Megiddo, could be said to be Kotori's strongest attack, it was impossible for her to kill Xiaming by herself even if she used her strongest attack. Not only that, but Kotori also suspected that her attack couldn't even inflict any injuries on Xiaming. And as it turned out, Kotori's prediction wasn't wrong. Amidst the torrential wave of flames, a figure with a pair of wings on his back and a scorpion-like barb stepped out of the air slowly. Needless to say, it was Xiaming. Xiaming wasn't injured at all under the full-force attack of the Scorching Destroyer Ghost, Camel, Cannon, Megiddo. However, his animal skin clothes had become tattered. There were scorch marks everywhere and smoke was rising from them. He looked a little battered. It was apparent that even though the might of the Scorching Destroyer, Camel, Cannon, Megiddo, wasn't enough to injure Xiaming, it was still beyond his expectations and left him in a tough spot. It seems like I've underestimated you. Xiaming fixed his gaze on the group of young ladies and a murderous glint flashed in his eyes. Even though I don't know what kind of beings you are exactly, you're able to use your mere strength of the 9th stage to put me in such a miserable state. Ladies, let me give you some praise for this. Despite his words, there wasn't a trace of praise on Xiaming's face. There was no anger in his eyes. Instead they were filled with coldness. Waves of black mist-like gas rolled around his body as his aura grew stronger and stronger. It didn't take long for him to break through the 9th stage and reach the peak. It was only at this moment that Xiaming finally became serious. Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Mikoto, Yoshino, and the other young ladies' eyes flickered as they sensed the powerful aura from Xiaming's body. Their expressions flickered with uncertainty. So strong. Toka clutched the sandal fawn tightly. Although her dreamy eyes wavered, she still looked at Xiaming with determination. He's really strong. We. Mikoto's voice was filled with apprehension. Can we really defeat that monster? Miss Origami. A trace of worry appeared on Yoshino's face. Miss Origami, are you all right? Miss Origami. Kotori. Kurumi gripped a matchlock gun of different lengths in one hand. Only a grave expression remained on her usually crazed and seductive face. Think of something. We can't win in a head-on battle. Kotori's eyes seemed to be burning with flames. Her gaze flickered as she focused on her hand. On Kotori's hand, or to be precise on her finger, was a simple and unadorned ring. It was one of the 3 rings Yukari gave to the group of young ladies before they left the capital of a different era for the Baruba Empire. There seemed to be something in the ring that could come in handy. Chapter 1944. From the ring Yukari gave her, not only did Kotori find her prided airship Fraxinus, she also found many other handy items. These items are all very convenient items that Wu Yan exchanged from the system in the past. For example, there were cloaks that could conceal one's presence, medicines that could replenish one's energy such as qi, mana and spiritual energy, and special items that could guide the way in certain situations. Kotori could find all of them. Fraxinus, which was supposed to be Wu Yan's noble phantasm, is also in Kotori's space ring. Since it can be used without the owner's presence, it's clear that everything in the ring was left behind by Wu Yan. After all, unless the owner agrees, the owner's noble phantasm can't be used by others. Kotori can imagine Wu Yan, who is worried about the girls, racked his brains to find a way to increase the girls' chances of victory. He kept all the useful items he kept in his storage ring and told Yukari to hand them over to them. Last night, Kotori checked the items in the ring. She found some items that Wu Yan didn't think he would be able to use, but he left them behind just in case. Among these items there are some that can be used now. Kotori flipped her hand and a transparent crystal scroll appeared in her hand. This is. Kwang-san was slightly surprised as she opened her mouth. Return scroll? That's right, it's a return scroll that can teleport the user to a preset teleportation point. As long as he crushed the town return scroll in his hand, the town return scroll would teleport him to a predetermined teleportation point. The teleportation point in Kotori's hand was set at a special place Wu Yan once visited. Kotori's fiery eyes flickered when she thought of the teleportation point and a certain existence in that place. Then she smiled. Nah. Kotori stared at Dark Scorpion hovering in the air in front of the girls and lowered her voice. I have an idea. As Kotori explained her thoughts, Toka, Meijio and Yoshino were at a loss. However, Kurumi's eyes lit up and she smiled sweetly. I think it's feasible. I think so too. If we use it well, we can even kill this pseudo-demigod. Kotori clenched her teeth. But if we want to implement this plan, we have to find a way to get in touch with Dark Scorpion. Get in touch with Dark Scorpion. That's no simple task. Just now, before Dark Scorpion became serious, only Origami, with the support of a group of girls, seized the opportunity to attack Dark Scorpion and come into contact with him. Now that Dark Scorpion is serious, it won't be easy to capture him. Let me do it. Just as the group of young women tensed up, wary of Xiaming and at a loss for what to do, a slightly weak voice rang out nearby. The group of girls immediately turned their heads to look. What they saw was a pale-faced Origami slowly floating up from the ground, clutching her chest as she gasped for breath after removing the rubble covering her body. Origami, Lady Origami. Seeing that Origami seemed to be fine, the girls were pleasantly surprised. Oh. In midair, Xiaming was also rather surprised. I didn't use my full strength in that attack, but it was enough to kill a Class 9 powerhouse. You're much stronger than an ordinary Class 9 human. Origami ignored Xiaming's words of praise and mockery. Her blue eyes looked at Xiaming without any ripples as she said this. I am still too weak. Xiaming wasn't the only one who was stunned. Even the group of young women was stunned by his words. Once upon a time I thought that the only thing left in my life was hatred. In order to obtain enough power for revenge, I gave up everything. When I woke up, I realized that I had wasted my life on meaningless things. Origami seemed to be talking to herself as she spoke indifferently. Once upon a time I also thought that I was saved. In order to repay the debt of gratitude, I once again gave my everything to that person. I no longer blindly pursued power. But now, I have once again awakened to the fact that if I don't have enough power, I don't even have the qualifications to give my life to that person. After saying that, Origami tossed away the expensive heavy cannon in her hand without any hesitation and cast her stern gaze towards Xiaming. I will once again pursue power. But this time it's not for revenge or to repay your debt. I don't want to defeat you. I want to give my life to that person. I want to use what belongs to me. As its voice subsided, Origami raised one of its hands, and on top of it was a small Tori. However, the most important thing wasn't the Tori. It was the thing inside the Tori. It was a gem emitting a dazzling white light. Looking at the gem that was emitting a dazzling white light, Xiaming spoke in surprise. What's that? Kotori and Meijio, who had obtained similar items before, widened their eyes in shock. Kurumi, Toka Yoshino and the others who vaguely sensed something, exclaimed in surprise. Spirit crystal. That's right. It was the spirit crystal that Origami obtained from Phantom. It should have belonged to Origami, but Wu Yen took it and returned it to her. It could grant humans the power of elves and turn the chosen ones into elves. Holding the spirit crystal that could change her existence at any time, Origami, who hated elves to the core, removed the Tori, covering it without hesitation and let her hand touch the gem emitting a dazzling white light. Buzz. In an instant the dazzling brilliance released from the gem expanded sharply. Shortly after, it floated up and fused into Origami's chest. Gulp. A sound echoed from Origami's body. It was the sound of her heart pounding violently. As though a brand new heart was born in her body, her heartbeat became violent all of a sudden. The scorching hot blood that was completely different from the blood flowing in her body was transferred to her body. Origami, who had never experienced such an unusual sensation, couldn't help but turn pale and kneel on the ground. Ah! At the next moment, Origami let out a painful yet joyful cry. Then a dazzling white light emanated from her body. What's wrong? Xiaming frowned as a hint of displeasure rose in his heart. What happened? Kotori and the other young ladies held their breaths and stared at the center of the dazzling light, waiting for their new companion to be born. They didn't have to wait for long before the intense white light suddenly dimmed, causing the space to darken. In the gray space, a beam of light shone silently. A strange young lady hovered in the beam of light and appeared before everyone's eyes. She was undoubtedly Origami. But what attracted everyone's attention was Origami's attire. It was a pure white gauze dress that extended upward along the curve of Origami's body. The dress only reached her knees. The design was rather unique, as though a blooming flower. A crown-like ring hovered above Origami's head. Silk that seemed to be organized by light hung down from the ring. Apart from the crown-like ring, the rest of the decorations were made of dazzling, pure white. At a glance it looked like a unique wedding dress. One couldn't help but think that its owner was an angel who descended from the darkness. No, not like. At that moment, Origami had transformed into an angel and was born into this world as a new elf. R1152. Chapter 1945. Kite Origami, Level 84. The strength of a human after fusing with the spirit crystal and becoming an elf was dependent on the compatibility and nature of the spirit crystal before becoming an elf. Phantom, who gave the Origami spirit crystals, had also said that there was a limit to the use of the spirit crystal. The more the spirit crystal's nature and compatibility matched with the spirit crystal, the more powerful the spirit's power would be after it was turned into an elf. With Origami's original talent, if she fused with the spirit crystal, her strength wouldn't be any weaker than Toka's. But now, Origami had gone through the Dem magic treatment and the transformation of the magical pond water. Her constitution had been greatly improved. Naturally, after fusing with the spirit crystal, her strength had become even more powerful. Level 84. Intermediate rank 9. This was Origami's current strength. She was even stronger than before. Xiaming, who was the first to sense the change in Origami's aura, frowned. Xiaming could sense a human aura from Origami just now, but now he couldn't sense any human aura from Origami at all. His intuition told him that the change in this woman before him was on a level that even he couldn't touch, which made him very unhappy. What did you do? Origami still ignored him. Under everyone's gaze, she transformed into a streak of light and disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already in front of Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Mikoto, Yoshino and the other girls. She lifted her head and looked straight at Xiaming. I'll hold him back. Upon hearing that, the girls didn't have the time to express their thoughts about Origami's sudden spirit transformation. Can you do it? Kotori asked solemnly. Even if you're in spirit form, it's too dangerous to face a pseudo-demigod. No problem. Origami said calmly. It's fine if it's for a short time. Kotori and Kurumi looked at each other and nodded. Get ready for battle. The group of girls nodded their heads. Origami immediately raised her hand. Metatron. The sun fell from the sky in response to Origami's call. In midair, a halo suddenly shot down and surrounded Origami. The halos that descended from the sky turned into pieces that looked like wings. It had the appearance of a pair of wings, but it looked like a pair of golden fossilized wings spinning around the Origami. With a spin they formed a ring. It was as if a huge crown was placed on Origami's head. Army Destroyer Singer. March. On the side, Mikoto played a song that had the effect of increasing her strength. The spiritual energy that was just born in Origami's body but was skillfully controlled by her suddenly skyrocketed. The upgraded Origami immediately opened its hands. Along with the folding action, the front end of the huge crown-like Metatron on its head split into two parts, forming a circle like the sun. Metatron, Sun Mesh. The ring-shaped angel that unfolded above Origami's head began to spin. Every wing of the angel, that seemed to have turned into golden fossils, emanated a strong radiance as they spun. Boom! In an explosion, the Metatron that emanated a strong radiance scattered light in all directions. It was a light beam that bombarded the surroundings indiscriminately. Cheap tricks. Dark Scorpion, who wanted to figure out what kind of beings the girls were, glared coldly. He raised one of his arms and a thick black mist emerged from it like a shield before him. In an instant, a large number of light beams that were released from the Metatron blasted in all directions. Boom, 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 boom. It was as if a golden rain had fallen. Beams of light containing astonishing power were flying through the sky. Not only did this indiscriminate attack land on the Baruba Empire's royal city, but it also struck the shield-like black mist in front of Dark Scorpion, killing many of the demonic beasts that were wreaking havoc there. Boom, 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 boom. When the light beams struck the black mist, they were like rainwater falling into a swamp. While the black mist rippled slightly, they failed to hurt Dark Scorpion, who was behind it. Maintaining the posture of holding the shield formed by the black mist with one hand, Dark Scorpion shifted his gaze to Origami as though she were the only enemy in his eyes. He swung his other arm casually and sharp black spears emerged on the shield formed by the black mist one after another. Like cannonballs erupting from the muzzle of a cannon, they rubbed against the chaotic atmosphere and pierced toward Origami in the blink of an eye. Malik. However, before the sharp black spears touched Origami, the pieces of Metatron that were spinning above Origami's head suddenly paused. Then, like a whirlwind, they spun in the opposite direction and gathered to form a pair of huge wings that hovered behind Origami. This way, together with Origami's spiritual equipment, she looked like an angel in a wedding dress. At the next moment, Origami transformed into a shadow that vanished on the spot and appeared in another direction, dodging all of Dark Scorpion's attacks. As if to seize this opportunity, the Origami General waved its hand that was raised above its head, and the wings that were spread out behind the Origami General spread out in all directions. Metatron Couture. The scattered Metatrons seemed to possess their own consciousness as they transformed into streams of light that streaked across the sky in different trajectories, surrounding Dark Scorpion from all directions and pointing their sharp tips at him. Buzz. Along with the sound of space trembling, the front ends of the wing-shaped Metatrons gathered surges of spiritual power, transforming into enormous light beams that shot out one after another as though they were shooting from all directions. The uniform light beams emitted a dazzling brilliance that enfolded Dark Scorpion's entire vision like razor-sharp spears that pierced straight at him. The brilliance dazzled Dark Scorpion's vision and left him frustrated. Get lost. Xiaming's face immediately turned cold. He suddenly extended his hand and black fog surged endlessly in his hand, turning into a huge beast claw. He reached forward and grabbed all the beams of light in the beast claw that blotted out the sky. Then he clenched his fist. Boom. All of the enormous light beams released by the Metatron exploded in a loud, muffled explosion under the grip of the enormous beast claw. Is that all? Then just surrender obediently. Dark Scorpion's expression was completely frosty. It was apparent that the fact that he hadn't been able to take down this group of beings who were like ants in his eyes for a long time had worn away his remaining patience. Don't worry. I won't kill you before I figure out who exactly you are. As soon as Dark Scorpion finished his sentence, he stomped his feet in the air and walked toward Origami step by step. As he moved, an overwhelming black mist surged out of his body and coiled around him. The pressure emanating from his body made the spiritual energy in Origami's body flow somewhat sluggish. At that moment, Army Destroyer Singer Rondo. In the sky, a violent sound wave descended abruptly like a storm descending from the heavens, smashing into Dark Scorpion's body. Boom. Caught off guard, Dark Scorpion was struck squarely by the violent sound wave. He plummeted from the impact and landed heavily on the ground, cracking it along his feet. Buzz. At the same time, a black shadow expanded on the ground where Dark Scorpion stood. One after another, pale hands emerged from the shadow and wrapped around Dark Scorpion. Got you. Chapter 1946. Got you. Along with this voice, the main bodies of the pale arms wrapped around Xiaming's body slowly emerged from the black shadow that expanded from the ground. They were young girls wearing black and red Gothic princess dresses. They had long and short ponytails and had red and gold eyes. Their gold eyes were in the shape of a clock, and their faces were filled with both joy and ferocity. These girls looked exactly the same. Even their expressions were exactly the same. Naturally, they were all Kurong 3. To be exact, they were clones of Curdans who used the Bullet of 8 to recreate themselves in the past timeline. Looking at the young ladies who looked both delighted and malevolent as they wrapped their arms around his body and bound him firmly, Xiaming couldn't help but be taken aback. He came to a halt for an instant. Ice puppet, Psatkiel. The instant Xiaming came to a halt, a white beam of light containing a terrifyingly low temperature descended from the sky like a comet descending from the sky, leaving a trail of ice shards in its wake. In a loud thud, it landed where Xiaming was. Kacha kacha. All of a sudden, the space within a 10-meter radius around Dark Scorpion, including the ground and the Kwongs who were grabbing him tightly, began to crack with hair-raising sounds. They were gradually covered in hard ice and shortly after, turned into an enormous iceberg. The bone-chilling cold assaulted Xiaming's body from all directions, causing his pupils to tremble. Rolling black mist surged out of his body like heat waves, rampaging inside the iceberg. Rumble. Judging from how fast it was cracking, in less than 10 seconds, the 10-meter-tall iceberg would collapse under Dark Scorpion's violent struggle. However, these 10 seconds were enough for the group of young ladies to do a lot of things. Zafkiel. Bullet of 7 Zayin. Accompanied by the sound of a gunshot, a pitch-black bullet that could stop the flow of time streaked across space. In the sharp sound of breaking the air, it landed on the trembling ground. On the iceberg that was cracking continuously. With the point of impact as the center, a transparent pitch-black light barrier suddenly fluctuated, enveloping the entire iceberg that was cracking. For a moment, regardless of whether it was the iceberg that was cracking, the black fog that was surging, or the struggling Dark Scorpion, all of them stopped moving under the cover of the transparent pitch-black light. Dark Scorpion didn't have any means to deal with Kuang San's time ability. For Dark Scorpion, what he needed to be wary of was Kuang San's ability, not to mention that he had suffered a loss because of it before. Therefore, no matter how powerful Violent 3's ability was, it would take time to fire a bullet and even more time to hit Dark Scorpion. This time was enough for Dark Scorpion to dodge Kuang San's bullet when he was on guard. However, being frozen by the low temperature of the Sadkiel and caught by Kuang San's doppelganger, even Dark Scorpion couldn't dodge in time. He could only be frozen in the torrent of time by the bullet of 7. Now! Kuang San hurriedly shouted. Miss Meijio. Got it. Meijio's fingers seemed to turn into phantoms in the space in front of her, sliding across the light keyboard unfolding in front of her. Army Destroyer Singer. March. With Army Destroyer Singer as the center, the materialized sound wave reverberated in the surroundings, contracted and surged forward. In the next moment, the sound wave rippled through the bodies of Tohiro and Origami as if it was absorbed and drilled into their bodies. In an instant, Tohiro and Origami's aura expanded wildly. The spiritual powers in their bodies turned into steam-like airflows that rolled violently. Upon sensing the surge of spiritual powers in her body, Tohiro puffed out her chest, lifted her foot and knocked the ground heavily with her heel. Bam! The ground behind Tohiro trembled violently, exploded and bulged upward. Then a huge golden throne that was far taller than Tohiro emerged. Bam! There was another explosion, but this time it wasn't the ground that exploded. Instead, it was the huge throne that stood behind 10 incense that exploded into countless small pieces. Like paper scraps that were swept up in a storm, they circled around and gathered on the huge sword in 10 incense's hand. When all the fragments of the throne gathered on Tohiro's sandalphon, a huge, ferocious-looking sword that was more than 10 meters long appeared in her hand. At the same time, Origami waved her hand and the Metatron that hovered around her also gathered in a whistling sound. It hovered above Origami's head and transformed back into its original shape of a crown. Shortly after, Origami spread out her hand and the Metatron that had transformed into a crown spun in its entirety, heading toward Dark Scorpion. It looked like a huge cannon muzzle. Immediately after, pitch-black light particles condensed on the great sword in 10 Fragrance's hand, turning into a black stream of air that began to wander along the greatsword's body. The crown on Origami's head also bloomed with light. Strands of light gathered inside the crown, making the light more and more resplendent. Sandalphon, the last sword, Halvan Helaf. Metatron, cannon crown, half Helev. The shouts of the 2 elf young ladies overlapped, reverberating between heaven and earth. Pitch black and pure white light flickered in this world. Clang. In a crisp sword hum, Tohiro slashed down with her final sword, half Helev, dragging a huge spiritual energy sword wave. Like a crescent moon flashing across space, the sword wave tore through the ground and space and swept forward. Boom. At the same time, the Metatron above Origami's head flashed with a strong light. The light that gathered transformed into a terrifying light stream that shot out in an unstoppable burst. The sound of space being compressed resounded as it blasted forward along with the huge sword wave. Under the illumination of the pitch-black and pure white light, the pitch-black sword wave and pure white light beam landed ruthlessly on the iceberg that was frozen in the torrent of time. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion reverberated throughout the desert of the Baruba Empire. Violent shockwaves swept out in all directions like a whirlwind, stirring up clouds of sand and dust that filled the sky. Under Jaffar's command, the Baruba soldiers who were retreating in an orderly manner screamed in agony when they were hit by the sudden shockwave. They fell to the ground in all directions and their bodies, which were already in bad shape, worsened even further. The magical beasts wreaking havoc in the Baruba Empire's royal city were in an even more miserable state. Some of them were directly smashed to pieces by the shockwaves, while others were swept out of the city and blown away in all directions, disappearing without a trace. This time, the already dilapidated royal city was completely crushed in the long river of history. One could vaguely see that the majestic royal city in the middle of the 2 majestic mountain ranges was no more. All that was left was a huge pit standing in the middle of the mountain range. Bast *RD. Amidst the sand and dust that filled the sky in the pit, Xieming, whose body was emitting light smoke and covered in tiny wounds from head to toe, retreated with a furious expression and flew into the sky. Looking at the countless tiny wounds on his body, his eyes glinted in a vicious glint. It was apparent that Xiaming didn't expect himself to be injured. To be injured by a bunch of ants. I will make sure you die a graveless death. Xiaming bellowed, but he didn't notice that a figure had been waiting for him on the path he retreated. The figure extended a hand and placed it on Xiaming's shoulder. I've caught you this time. Chapter 1947. The hand that suddenly appeared on Xiaming's shoulder caused his withdrawing body to violently pause. His pupils shrunk as he turned his head with all his might and looked behind him. The first thing that entered Xiaming's eyes was a smear of scarlet. It was the color of the blazing flames and also the color of the pupils of the spirit who controlled the flames. Like a fairy who had fallen into the mortal world, Kotori appeared behind Xiaming unknowingly with a feather coat hanging over her slender shoulders. She wore a white kimono with burning sleeves and stepped on flames beneath her feet. Her delicate, pretty face with a malicious smile was revealed to Xiaming. No, to be more precise, Kotori didn't appear behind Dark Scorpion without anyone noticing. Instead, the Misaka sisters who were on standby in Fraxinus had calculated Dark Scorpion's escape route with their outstanding computational ability and the precision instruments in the command room. She was waiting for Dark Scorpion to walk right into her trap. Earlier, Kurumi, Toka, Origami, Meijio and Shiba launched their all-out attack to attract Xiaming's attention. Not only did they make him overlook Kotori's presence, but they also lured him to Kotori's escape route. Before Dark Scorpion could react, Kotori placed one hand on Dark Scorpion's shoulder and held a translucent return scroll in her other hand. Before Dark Scorpion could react, she tightened her grip on the return scroll. Boom! At the next moment, the crystal-like scroll shattered and a blinding radiance erupted. It shrouded Kotori and He Ming, turning them into tiny particles of light that dissipated on the spot. Dark Scorpion's vision suddenly blurred, and the scene before him distorted. By the time he recovered, the scene before him had changed drastically. The endless desert of the Baruba Empire was gone, only to be replaced by a vast ocean. That's right. An ocean. Xiaming was currently in the air above an island. There was a city on the island. It was a rather ancient city. The buildings in this city were not as Western as the ones in the Ailu Empire, nor were they as Western as the ones in the Baruba Empire. Because they were built in the desert. There was a strong aura of a prostitute and there was a hint of vicissitudes in it. In the city, all the buildings were made of red and white marble, giving people a sense of holiness. Some of the larger buildings still had the appearance of a castle. It was like a gathering place of the ancient Western European aristocrats. The ground was paved with red bricks, and trees with green leaves were planted on both sides of the street. There were also flower beds around the roots of the trees. It was very beautiful. Of course, while the city was beautiful, a beast king like Dark Scorpion wouldn't be able to understand its beauty. Perhaps he would even destroy it mercilessly because it was an eyesore. However, Xiaming's heart was completely shaken. He couldn't extricate himself and didn't have the mood to care about the city at all. It was because there was a tree in the center of the city, or rather, in the center of the island. It was a giant tree that could barely be described as a sky-high tree. The canopy of the giant tree was at least 10 kilometers in diameter, completely covering half of the city on the island. The leaves were extremely dense, making it difficult for sunlight to pass through them. The vast canopy of the tree was enough to cover the sky and cover the sun. But that wasn't the most important thing. Most importantly, there was an extremely ancient and ethereal aura emanating from the giant tree. It made Xiaming, who had reached the pseudo-demigod level, feel a strong sense of danger. His intuition told him that if he didn't leave the island now, there would only be one outcome for him. Death. He'd be killed by the giant tree in front of him. This intuition made Dark Scorpion's first thought to be absurd. It was just a tree. How could it kill him? Could it be that the tree would move and attack him? Because of this thought, Xiaming lost his last chance to escape. If the members of the royal families of the three empires were here, they would definitely recognize this island. This island was the Emperor Island. The giant tree standing in the middle of Emperor Island was naturally the Guardian Tree. It was a level 98 guardian tree that was infused with the divine powers of the three deities and possessed earth-shattering power. As the true guardian of the land of gods, The Guardian Tree's duty was to expel anyone other than the three empires' royalty who wanted to enter Emperor Island. It also prevented outsiders from entering the Land of Gods, guarded the Land of Gods and stopped the Guardians from leaving Emperor Island. And now, Xiaming appeared above Emperor Island silently. To the Guardian Tree, which had gained sentience but didn't have high spiritual intelligence, what was this? Invasion. Therefore, the Guardian Tree, which only moved when the spatial channel to the Land of Gods was opened every 10 years, finally let out a bellow like a king whose territory was invaded while Xiaming was still in shock. Buzz. Almost in the blink of an eye, the Guardian Tree emanated a rich green radiance all over. Its tree crown that blotted out the sky trembled abruptly, releasing an ancient, majestic aura that pressed down on the entire Emperor Island like a heavy mountain, causing the entire island to tremble. Upon sensing the terrifying aura, Xiaming finally believed his premonition and his expression changed drastically. But it was a pity that it was too late for regrets. Buzz. The Guardian Tree's tree crown trembled again. The rich green radiance hovering above it coalesced into a beam of light that shot out and swept towards Xiaming. The beam of light did not pose any threat. It did not even cause the slightest sound. It was like a beam of light that had shot out from a lighthouse, silently passing through space and shooting in Xiaming's direction. However, it was precisely this soundless and harmless ray of light that caused Xiaming's hairs to stand on end. His face was filled with shock as he frantically retreated backwards. However, as Xiaming retreated, a scorching beam of fire suddenly shot over from behind him. The scorching heat caused the atmosphere to become chaotic. It shot through space and landed heavily on Xiaming's back where he had to pass through. Boom. Flames and waves of fire rose in midair above the Emperor Island, dyeing a corner of the sky scarlet. Ah! Xiaming, who was focused on dodging the Guardian Tree's attack, was caught off guard and took the blow. His entire back was scorched black. He let out a blood-curdling shriek, and in the explosion of flames and waves of fire, his retreating figure was pushed forward instead. In an instant, the beam of light that flew over silently met Xiaming head-on, enveloping him and stopping him in his tracks as though he were frozen in space. Swish! Along with a sharp whistle, an afterimage flitted across the sky like a whip, lashing out at the frozen Xiaming. It was a tree root. It was a root that extended from the Guardian Tree. The ordinary-looking tree root was accompanied by a sharp whistling sound. It was accompanied by a violent force and ferocious force as it viciously whipped Xiaming from top to bottom. No! Xiaming could only let out a desperate roar before the tree root, which had turned into an afterimage, landed on his body. Boom! With a muffled sound, Xiaming, who was frozen in the air, was struck by the huge root. His entire body exploded into a large blob of blood, creating a rain of blood that fell towards the royal capital below. This pseudo-demigod beast king, who had the fate of the entire Baruba Empire in his hands and had planned to kill everyone in the Baruba Empire, was reduced to ashes in less than 10 seconds under the attack of the level 98 Guardian Divine Tree. Not even a corpse was left behind. Looking at this scene, Kotori, who was equipped with a black and red heavy cannon wrapped in flames, heaved a sigh of relief. But her body tensed up and she flipped her hand, retrieved a teleportation scroll and crushed it without hesitation. Boom! In the sound of the scroll shattering, Kotori turned into light particles and disappeared on the spot. Swish! A thick, sturdy tree root that was as sharp as a spear penetrated the spot where Kotori was standing. Shortly after, she realized that the enemy was no longer there and slowly shrunk back to the Guardian Tree. It was only at that moment that the Guardians on the Emperor Island were alerted. The entire Emperor Island was in an uproar, announcing the end of this sudden invasion. Chapter 1948. Baruba Empire, Royal City. When Kotori teleported herself and Dark Scorpion back to the Emperor Island with a recall scroll, the shockwaves from Mika's Gab Gel, March, Toka's Sandalphon, Final Sword, and Origami's Metatron, Artilif finally died down. Humph. After enduring the shockwaves from Mijiu's and Origami's strongest attacks, the city guards who were retreating fell to the ground once again. Their bodies were piled with all sorts of rubble and stones as they wailed in agony. Roar, ow, woo! The magical beast army led by Xiaming didn't fare well either. In fact, they ended up in an even more tragic state than the city guards of the Baruba Empire. Many of them were covered in blood, and they let out weak cries as they struggled on the ground, but they couldn't get up. The sky that was originally filled with locust-like flying magical beasts had once again become empty. Obviously, under the attack of the aftershock, these flying magical beasts had been blown to an unknown corner of the desert. Sand and dust filled every corner of the scene, causing everyone's vision to become blurry. As a result, the ground of the Baruba Empire caved in, forming a huge crater. It was an extremely tragic sight. Only the elven girls, Gudda, Kuluan, Will, Jebi, and the 7 Class 9 magical beasts were not affected by the shockwaves. Or rather, the impact was minimal. They did not fall to the ground like the other city guards and magical beasts. Instead, they barely managed to stand where they were. Gudda, Kuluan, Will, and Jebi looked at the ruins of the Baruba Empire's royal city. While they were shocked by Toka and Origami's attack, they couldn't help but feel sad. Ever since Baruba, one of the 4 great gods, established the Baruba Empire, the capital city of the Baruba Empire had never been damaged. However, every time it was damaged, it was almost harmless. Let alone shaking the foundation of the city, it didn't even bring about minor ailments. It was a smooth sailing for the city. That was to be expected. The Baruba Empire was one of the 3 great powers that divided the Spalier world. No one dared to touch it. The Baruba Empire's royal city was also protected by a demigod guardian, who could harm the Baruba Empire's royal city. But this time, the Baruba Empire's royal city finally couldn't survive the ordeal and was crushed in the long river of history. The pitiful Baruba Empire's royal city was known as the sturdiest fortress in the Spalier world due to its terrain, structure, and other factors. But in this war between humans and magical beasts, it became the first royal city to be breached. One couldn't help but lament at karma. Yet, the Baruba Empire's upper echelons couldn't harbor any resentment against the people who caused this, which was the most tragic thing. After all, the other party was also indirectly saving the Baruba Empire, wasn't it? There was no doubt that the Baruba Empire was much more important than the royal city. Roar. 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 The 7 Class 9 magical beasts that Dark Scorpion brought along each occupied a corner. With their own roars, they gradually retreated and distanced themselves from the battlefield. Of course, the Class 9 magical beasts weren't afraid of Gudda, Kuluan, Will, and Jebi. Instead, they were fearful of the young elven girls who released such a terrifying attack. In the center of the royal city ruins, Kurumi, Toka, Origami, Mijio, Yoshino, and the other young elven girls couldn't stop panting. Toka and Origami half knelt on the ground with intense fatigue in their eyes. Mijio slumped to the ground listlessly. Kurumi and Yoshino's angels were also nowhere to be seen. They were more or less exhausted. After a series of coordinated attacks, it was no surprise that the group of elven girls had exhausted too much of their spiritual energy. In particular, Ten Incense, Origami, and Meijio, who had released their most powerful attacks, as well as Meijio, who had been buffing the girls, had exhaustion in their eyes and faces that could not be concealed. It was imaginable how hard the young elves had fought. If the 7 Class 9 magical beasts pounced on them at that moment, the young elven girls would definitely be in grave danger. But it was a pity that magical beasts were magical beasts after all. Before they became demigod beast kings, even Class 9 magical beasts weren't as intelligent as human children. Their instincts often took precedence over their actions. Under the deterrence of the terrifying attack, the Class 9 magical beasts were instinctively fearful of the young elven girls. Therefore, not only did they not take advantage of the situation, but they also distanced themselves from the young elven girls. Buzz. Not long after, a resplendent light flashed in the air. Kotori emerged from the light and fell to the ground. However, she immediately knelt down on one knee. Her face was filled with lingering fear as she panted slightly. Kotori, Miss Kotori. The elven girls immediately stood up and came to Kotori's side. Miss Kotori. Yoshino supported Kotori and asked worriedly. Are you all right? I'm fine. Kotori shook her head, broke free from Yoshino's support and let out a long sigh. Although I heard from Big Brother that the guardian tree of the Emperor Island is powerful and even stronger than Yukari, I didn't expect it to be this powerful. The reason why Kotori dared to boast that she could kill Dark Scorpion with a teleportation scroll was because she found the teleportation point of the teleportation scroll that Wu Yen left behind on the Emperor Island. She recalled what Wu Yen said about the Guardian Tree when he returned from the Emperor Island and came up with the idea to make use of it. The Guardian Tree's duty was to protect the land of gods and prevent outsiders from entering the Emperor Island. It also prevented the Guardian family members from leaving the Emperor Island without permission. Apart from the royal families of the three empires, any outsiders who invaded the Emperor Island would be struck by the Guardian Tree. On the other hand, Dark Scorpion wasn't a member of the three empires' royal families. His sudden appearance on Emperor Island would definitely trigger the Guardian Tree. With the Guardian Tree's level 98 strength, it would be a piece of cake for it to deal with a pseudo-demigod who hadn't even reached level 90. The Guardian Tree was indeed powerful. The pseudo-demigod Beast King, who was able to handle the young elven girl's attacks with ease, died in less than 3 moves. Although Kotori's interference was partly due to the fact that Kotori had obstructed Dark Scorpion, it was still enough to show how powerful the Guardian Tree was. The word, invincible, wasn't just for show. Fortunately, Kotori didn't let her guard down and used a teleportation scroll to leave as soon as she saw Dark Scorpion being dealt with. Otherwise, Kotori, who wasn't a member of the three empires' royal families, would have suffered the same fate as Dark Scorpion. At the very least, Kotori didn't think her Undying Phoenix's regenerative ability could save her from the Guardian Tree's attacks. Where's the Beast King? Kwangsan looked around. Did the plan work? Yes. Kotori took a deep breath and stood up. She told the elven girls, it worked. Dark Scorpion is dead. Hearing this, all the elven girls, including the kind-hearted four, heaved a sigh of relief and smiled joyfully. Even a faint smile appeared on Origami's face, making her look exceptionally beautiful. Kotori also smiled at the sight of the smiles on the elven girls' faces. She looked up at the sun hanging high in the sky and murmured to herself, let's go. Do you see it? Yes. The war between us. Behemoth Forest, capital of alternate generations. On the top floor of the Heart of Generations, Yukari watched the scene of Xieming being killed by the Guardian Tree and Kotori escaping from the Emperor Island. A smile appeared on her face as she raised her hand and made a slight stroke, opening up another rift. Then a strange black light shot out from the crack. It was like a small animal that ran into a graveyard in a panic. Before it could react, Yukari grabbed it and covered it with a barrier. The second one. R1152. Chapter 1949. On the other side, while Shokuhu Misaki's group headed towards the Ailu Empire and Kotori's group headed towards the Baruba Empire dealt with the Beast Kings, Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, and Yushin's group headed towards the Feiya Empire ran into a huge problem. If the Spalier world were to be shown on a map with the Behemoth Forest as the center, the Ailu Empire was to the southwest, the Baruba Empire was to the north, and the Feiya Empire was to the southeast. The three empires surrounded the Behemoth Forest in a triangle formation. Due to the warmer climate in the southeast, the rainfall was higher than the other two empires. Because of this, the Feiya Empire's environment wasn't as bad as the Baruba Empire. In fact, it was even better than the Ailu Empire. One day after the girls split up from the supply town and headed to their respective empires, Kotori and the other elven girls finished off Dark Scorpion who attacked the Baruba Empire. Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, and Yushin who entered the Feiya Empire had yet to arrive at the Feiya Empire's capital. The reason was simple. It was because he could no longer fly. That's right. They couldn't fly anymore. Ever since they entered the Feiya Empire, Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, and Yushin realized that they couldn't fly. Every time they tried to fly, a heavy pressure would press down on them from above. Everyone who was 5 meters above the ground would be pushed back down to 5 meters below the ground. That is to say, once Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Yakaina, and the other girls are 5 meters above the ground, their bodies will be pulled back to 5 meters above the ground due to an unknown pressure, unable to fly any further. That was why Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Yushin, and the rest of the girls who lost their ability to fly were still wandering around the borders of Feiya Empire. They couldn't reach the Feiya Empire's capital even after a long time. At this moment, Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yagiya, Yuhin, and the other girls were leading 5,000 Misaka sisters in one of the forests of Feiya Empire. With great difficulty he led the large group in an attempt to pass through this large forest. Chuju, who was leading the group, suddenly stopped and looked up at the sky. Under the dark sky, a crescent moon was hanging in the sky all by itself. The cold moonlight shone down from the sky. The light illuminated the path in the forest so that the girls wouldn't be blinded. They couldn't see anything. Only now did Hinajuku realize that night had fallen. Wiping the sweat from her face, she turned to look at Mikoto, who was walking beside her. "Mikoto, it's getting late. Let the sisters rest." Mikoto lifted her head and looked at the sky. She didn't want to stop and rest, but she thought about her sisters' bodies. Even though they were healed to the level of a normal person, they were only at the level of a normal person. Even if they had the help of this CR unit, their stamina should be pretty much exhausted right now. With that in mind, Mikoto nodded in agreement. "Then let's rest." Under Hinajuku and Kotori's orders, the Misaka sisters spread out and skillfully took out their tents. Some of the Misaka sisters were responsible for setting them up, while the others went to gather some firewood and started a bonfire. Wisps of smoke rose from a corner of the forest as if they were camping. The faint bonfire danced lightly, bringing a trace of warmth and light to this silent and cold night. Beside the largest fire, Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Zhou Xian and the other girls sat around the fire facing Wu Yan. Yijia was fiddling with the flames of the bonfire with the branch in his hand. His mercury-like eyes were filled with displeasure. Seeing Yijia like this, Xian's eyes narrowed as if she knew what Yijia was dissatisfied with. She tilted her head. "Question, is Yakuya still angry?" "Isn't that obvious?" She casually tossed the branch into the bonfire. Her delicate and cute face shone brightly under the illumination of the bonfire. She rested her chin on her palm and had an indignant look on her face. "We are the hurricane witches, the fairies of the Bachyu family. We were rejected by the sky. This is a great humiliation. As fairies with the ability to control the wind, the sky has always been Yakuya's and Zhou Xian's domain. In the world of date battle, the two elven girls relied on their swift and violent movement range and speed to leave the troublesome Fisi and Dem in the dust every time they appeared, living a carefree life. Now once Yijia and Xian were 5 meters above the ground, they could no longer fly any higher. It was as if there was an invisible ceiling there. No matter how hard they tried, they could not fly up. How could Yijia, who had always regarded the sky as his domain, be happy? In fact, Xian was also unhappy in his heart, but he didn't vent it out. Naturally, he could understand Yijushi's dissatisfaction. "Not being able to fly has brought us a lot of trouble." Mikoto sighed. "If we continue like this, when will we reach the Faya Empire's capital?" "If we keep going like this, we won't be able to reach Faya Empire's capital even after a few years," Chuju said helplessly. "That's why we have to find a city and see if we can take an airship to Faya Empire's capital. Otherwise we'll be in big trouble." Mikoto nodded. She bit her nails and said in annoyance, "Seriously, why can't we fly anymore? Didn't I give you a holy order?" Yakuya crossed his arms and snorted. "It's the sky that's rejecting us." Hinajuku and Mikoto looked at each other. Then Hinajuku said with a hint of resentment in her voice, "I say, Yakuya, can't you make it easier for us to understand?" It means that Yakuya is saying that the authority to control the sky has been taken away by someone. Zhou Xian said with an expressionless and listless face. "Someone is controlling the wind in the sky." "Someone is controlling the wind in the sky?" Both Hinajuku and Mikoto hesitated for a moment. Then Mikoto said with uncertainty, "You're saying that someone is controlling the wind in the sky so that we can't fly?" "I agree," agreed. Xian nodded gently. She raised her hand and a small tornado appeared on it. "Yakuya and Zhou Xian can feel that the wind in the sky has been taken away by someone else. That's why we can't fly." Other than Yakuya, Chuju and Mikoto didn't know what she was talking about, but they could guess the gist of it. In other words, someone was interfering with the act of flying, turning the sky 5 meters above the ground into a complete forbidden zone. That was why everyone was unable to fly up into the sky. That's where the question comes. Who is interfering with other people's flight? Why are they interfering with other people's flight? What's the point of doing this? Since he dares to invade the territory of us, the 8 dancing spirits, he should be prepared to suffer the punishment of the heavenly spear. Yejusher clenched his fists and yelled in an excited manner. It just so happens that my divine power has evolved under the cleansing of the sacred water. Let me, the spirit of Bachiyaji, show you how foolish it is to trespass on my territory. Translate. Zhou Xian said calmly. Due to the transformation of the magical water, Yakuya is eager to find someone to fight. That's why he's very excited. Zhou Xian. Yakuya glared at Zhou Xian in annoyance. He didn't care about his Chinibu speech anymore. Why did you expose my thoughts? Refute. Even if Zhou Xian didn't expose Yakuya's thoughts, everyone would understand just by looking at how excited he is. I'm not excited. Hinajuku and Mikoto could only smile bitterly as they watched the Baba sisters bicker with each other. But at the same time, they had a better understanding of the relationship between the two sisters. Boom. At this moment, a loud sound reverberated. Chapter 1950. Boom. In the middle of the night, in the middle of the quiet forest, the thunderous explosion was abrupt and loud. All of the Misaka sisters who were resting immediately stood up. Some of them grabbed their lightsabers while others raised their heavy cannons. They were all on high alert as they looked at the end of the forest path in front of them. Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yukian, and the other girls also stood up and looked towards the front. What's that sound? Yukian asked hesitantly. It's an explosion? No. Mikoto's forehead flashed with a flash of lightning and her brows furrowed. That sounds like something hitting something. Is that so? Chuju squinted her eyes, trying to see through the lack of light. She gave up and turned to Ikaros, who hadn't said a word. Right now Ikaros had one hand pressed against her ear. Illusory square frames appeared in her pair of indigo pupils. The color of her eyes was constantly changing like a radar, constantly fluctuating. Wide-range radar activated. Detected signs of life. Number 5. Initial assessment, humans. Humans. Chuju, Mikoto, Yukian, and Yukian's eyes lit up with excitement. Because the three empires had gathered all the combat forces in their respective cities in the capital city, the combat forces that could not be used and the ordinary civilians were evacuated overseas to take refuge. That's why the girls didn't see a single human on their way here. The only ones they saw were rank 1, 2, and 3 demonic beasts. Now that they're finally able to see a human, not only can they ask for the location of the next city, they might even find out why they can't fly. When that happens, the girls' predicament will be much better. While the girls were overjoyed at the end of the forest path, two figures staggered as they appeared in a sorry state. It was imprinted in the eyes of the group of girls. What surprised the group of girls was that not far behind the two figures who were running in a sorry state, 3 other black figures flashed out. Their bodies actually carried a wave of undisguised killing intent. It came from afar. The girls sensed it. Question. Yukian tilted her head. What's going on? What's going on? Isn't it obvious? The only possibility is that the 3 people behind are chasing after the 2 in front. But why would humans kill each other? Isn't this the moment when the demonic beast army is attacking? The group of girls who didn't know that the same thing was happening in the Baruba Empire could only look at each other in confusion. As the 2 silhouettes in front of them ran towards them, the girls finally got a clear view of the 2 silhouettes. It was a male and female duo. The male was about 30 years old. He was a rather handsome middle-aged man. The female was a young girl who looked about 17 or 18 years old. The man's footsteps were staggering and there were some bloodstains on his body. It was obvious that he was injured. The young girl, on the other hand, looked a little better. However, at this moment her delicate and moving little face was filled with panic. As for the people chasing after the man and woman, they were 3 people dressed in black. They were dressed like assassins and even their faces were covered. Perhaps due to his injuries, the male's legs gave way and he almost fell. The young girl hurriedly helped him up. With this delay, the distance between the 3 black-clothed men behind him narrowed by quite a bit. He could even hear the laughter of the other party. The weak man tilted his head and glanced at the approaching black-clothed men. He gritted his teeth as despair filled his heart. Coincidentally, he saw a group of young ladies and many Misaka sisters in front of him. He was stunned for a moment before he was overjoyed. It was as if he had grasped onto the last straw as he shouted out loud. "Young miss in front, please help us." Upon hearing the man's shout, the girl seemed to have noticed the group of girls and Misaka sisters in front of her. Her face lit up with joy. However, as soon as the man shouted, the three men in black dashed over and surrounded the man and the girl. You still want to run? One of the black-clothed men looked down at the two men who were in a sorry state and laughed strangely. The male and the young girl ignored the assassin. Instead, they looked at the group of girls with pleading eyes. Seeing this, Hinagiku and Mikoto both frowned. How is it? Yakuya asked directly. Save them. Save them. This was also the reason why Hinagiku and Mikoto were frowning. No matter if it's Hinagiku or Mikoto, they're both very kind-hearted girls. If it's any other world, even if the other party didn't ask them for help, they'd jump out to help on their own accord. Unfortunately, this is the Spalier world. The Spalier world worships the strong. The unspoken rule is that the weak are prey to the strong. There are fights happening almost every day. Vendettas, killings for love, and even killings due to different interests are happening all the time. It's hard to determine who's right and who's wrong. Hinagiku and Mikoto are kind-hearted people, but they still remember what Wu Yen told them when they first came to Silveria. They mustn't be too merciful. Otherwise, if they wrongly help the bad guys or get used by the bad guys and end up doing bad things with good intentions, that would be a huge sin. That's why they're hesitating. As for the Bawa sisters, they don't mind. They're elves. They don't have any bad feelings towards humans, but they don't have any good feelings towards them either. Otherwise, they wouldn't have fought without hesitation every time they appeared and caused chaos in the world. That's why if Chuju and Mikoto decide to help, the Bawa sisters will do it without hesitation. If they don't, they'll just watch from the sidelines. It's because of this that even though one is arrogant and the other is lazy, they're very obedient. Wu Yan likes them a lot. Ikaros, who didn't care about anything other than Wu Yan's words, was even more indifferent. She stood quietly on the side and didn't say anything. Of course, the silence of the group of girls also caused the expressions of the two parties, one fleeing and one chasing, to darken at the same time. Little girl. One of the black-clothed men warned her. Mind your own business. Originally, these black-clothed men didn't need to care about a few young girls. If they interfered, they'd just kill them. However, the 5,000 Misaka sisters were standing behind the group of girls. They had the advantage in numbers. Even if it was a group of little girls, the three men in black could not help but be wary. They could only issue a warning. Ladies, we're the followers of Prince Kaya of Faya Empire's royal family. Please help us. The girl shouted. After this, Prince Kaya will definitely repay your kindness on our behalf. As soon as she said that, Hinagiku and Mikoto both looked up in surprise at the girl. You're Prince Kaya's followers? Hearing them call out their master's name, the man and girl didn't get angry. Instead, they were overjoyed. The three black-clothed men's eyes darkened. Could it be that they're acquaintances of Prince Kaya? Thinking of this, before the man and the young girl could react, one of the three black-clothed men coldly shouted, Brother Yi, let's go. Kill. Don't let anyone know. Hearing the order of this black-clothed person, the other two black-clothed people immediately responded in a deep voice. The three of them held the weapons in their hands tightly at the same time. Their bodies moved and directly rushed toward the man and the young lady. Majestic Do Chi surged out, causing the air in this part of the forest to slightly solidify. Looking at the level of their Do Chi, these three black-clothed men are rank 7 fighters. Peak rank 7 fighters. Seeing the three peak rank 7 black-clothed men rushing over from the surroundings, the man's expression abruptly changed. He pulled the young lady's hand and was about to stand up and charge towards the group of young ladies with all his might. However, 3 cold glinting weapons had already appeared around the two of them and pierced towards them like poisonous snakes. The man and woman, who had no power to fight back, could only watch as the 3 deadly weapons stabbed towards them. Their hearts were filled with shock and despair. Beep beep beep. Just as the two of them were about to close their eyes and wait for death, the sound of electricity clashing rang out. Chapter 1951. Beep. 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 When the sound of electricity clashing reverberated in the forest, an extremely dazzling bluish-white light covered everyone's vision, causing them to lose their vision. 3W. The man and the girl, who were waiting for death with their eyes closed, suddenly felt a sense of weightlessness, as if they were being hung up by something. Then they heard a whistling sound and their bodies lost their balance. The entire process only lasted for a short moment before the bluish-white light that blocked everyone's vision completely dissipated. When the man and the girl regained their vision, They were shocked to find that they had left their original position and were standing in the middle of a group of girls. Moreover, there was a hand on their shoulders. It was the hand of one of those young but extremely beautiful girls with long pink hair. No matter how stupid the man and girl were, they could guess what happened. Obviously, these girls had just made their move. First, she used some unknown method to block the vision of everyone present. Then, the girl with long pink hair rushed into the encirclement of the three men in black and brought the two of them out. And it only took a split second. As Kaya's followers, the man and girl had good eyesight. They didn't notice it in a hurry, but now they realized that the girls didn't show any signs of fear in the face of three peak stage 7 powerhouses. Instead, they looked nonchalant. There were 3 explanations for this. The first was that the girls thought that they could stop the 3 peak stage 7 powerhouses by relying on their numbers. The second was that the girls didn't put the 3 peak stage 7 powerhouses in their eyes at all. The last was that the girls couldn't distinguish each other's strength. Or perhaps they had some trump cards and thought that they could take down the 3 peak stage 7 powerhouses. Of course, it could also be a bluff, a fox borrowing the tiger's might. Or maybe they were just trying to make a move. On the other side, when the 3 men in black realized that the people they were supposed to kill had disappeared and appeared beside the girls, their pupils constricted and they exchanged glances. Unexpectedly, he retreated slightly. Needless to say, the 3 men in black already had the intention to retreat. But, since the girls had made their move, how could they let the men in black escape? Swoosh. In the next moment, there was an extremely neat and sharp sound of something breaking through the air. The 3 black-robed men's faces stiffened. Their retreating figures completely froze, and their eyes were filled with horror. It wasn't just the 3 black-clothed men. Even the man and woman who claimed to be Kaya's followers trembled, shock appearing on their faces. A group of Misaka sisters appeared around the 3 men in black. Some of them pointed laser swords at the men in black's throats while others pointed their heavy cannons at the men in black's forehead. They surrounded the 3 men in black in the middle and pointed their weapons at their bodies. In an instant, the 3 peak stage 7 powerhouses were all subdued. Who are you people? One of the black-clothed men's expression changed drastically as he shouted out in a threatening manner. We are from the royal family of the Fea. Hearing this, the group of girls was stunned. Royal family of the Fel Empire? The royal family of the Fea Empire was chasing after Prince Kaya's entourage? Even though the group of girls weren't that slow-witted, they still felt that their brains weren't enough to comprehend the situation after hearing this sentence. While the group of young women were in a daze, the man and the young woman were furious. How dare you claim to be from the royal family of the Fea Empire? The young lady directly pointed at the black-clothed man and angrily scolded. The man also explained to the group of young ladies. Ladies, these people are all collateral members of the Fea royal family. However, their master has the idea of usurping the throne and sent them to assassinate Prince Kaya in an attempt to seize the throne of the next emperor of the Fea Empire. You're saying that someone from the royal family of the Fea Empire wants to assassinate Prince Kaya in an attempt to usurp the throne? Mikoto opened her mouth in shock. Do you know what time it is now? The magical beast army is invading the Spalier world. The humans of the Spalier world are on the brink of extinction. However, in the face of such a crisis of extinction, the human race was still fighting among themselves and making themselves be attacked from both inside and outside? What kind of idiot would do such a thing? Actually, the collateral family of the Fea Empire's royal family has always had their eyes on the throne. When His Majesty Wea was still a prince, they made trouble for him many times. When Prince Kaya displayed his astounding talent and had a chance of becoming the next emperor, they madly objected. In the end, His Majesty Wea forcefully suppressed them. The man angrily shouted. And this time, Prince Kaya had been ordered to carry out an important mission. Everything had been going smoothly, but when we completed the mission and planned to return to the capital, these collateral members of the royal family suddenly ambushed and assassinated Prince Kaya. Right now, Prince Kaya is resisting with his followers who can still fight. He ordered the 2 of us to hurry back to the capital and expose the conspiracy of the royal family's collateral branch. However, we were discovered by these 3 people and were chased all the way here. Mist appeared in the girl's eyes. I wonder if Prince Kaya is still alive. Hinajiku and Mikoto's expression changed slightly. As for Kaya, the 2 girls' impression of him had stopped at the level of having some dealings with him. He couldn't be considered a friend, but he couldn't be considered a stranger either. Their relationship wasn't shallow, but it wasn't deep either. It was a lukewarm relationship. But back in the Spalier World Academy, Kaya's attitude towards Wu Yan's group was considered friendly. If Kaya was really in a life-or-death situation, the girls would have to go help him. With that in mind, Hinajuku looked at the man and the girl. Then where is Kaya now? The man and the girl were startled at first. Then they seemed to think of something and hesitated. Could it be that the ladies are planning to rescue Prince Kaya? Mikoto said with displeasure when she saw the two of them hesitating and dragging their feet. Could it be that you want to watch Kaya die? The man and the girl looked at each other and smiled bitterly, revealing a sorrowful expression. Ladies, we thank you on behalf of Prince Kaya for your kind intentions. The man smiled bitterly. But even if the ladies have the advantage in numbers, it's still very dangerous to rescue Prince Kaya. In order to ensure the death of Prince Kaya, the mastermind of the royal family had sent out a Peak Type 8 expert, 10 Type 8 experts, as well as over 100 Peak Type 7 experts. These 3 men in black had discovered us by chance and chased after us. The girl's eyes turned red. And this time, even though Prince Kaya had 10 rank 8 bodyguards, there wasn't a single peak rank 8. Prince Kaya himself is only a rank 8 and he only has 20 rank 7 bodyguards. Even with the ladies, they aren't a match for those people. In the world of Silveria, the 1st, 2nd and 3rd ranks were the lower ranks, the 4th, 5th and 6th ranks were the middle ranks, and the 7th, 8th and 9th ranks were the upper ranks. The lower, middle and upper ranks were like watersheds, making the difference between the 3 ranks very obvious. Therefore, only after becoming a powerhouse of the 7th step could warriors and magicians be qualified to call themselves powerhouses. It was also because of this watershed gap that a powerhouse of the 7th step could easily stop a group of 10,000 powerhouses of the 5th step. In the eyes of the man and the young woman, although there were many young women who looked exactly the same, they were too young after all. At best, they had reached the middle of the 5th or 6th order, and could not be compared to the high-grade powerhouses who had reached the 7th order. On the other hand, there were over 100 peak rank 7 powerhouses. Even if there weren't any rank 8 powerhouses, it was more than enough to deal with these rank 5 and 6 girls. Of course, the man and the young woman had subconsciously used their age to judge the strength of the young women, but they had completely forgotten that these young women had not only saved them from the hands of 3 peak 7th order black-clothed men in the blink of an eye, but they had also subdued the 3 peak 7th order powerhouses in an instant. In the eyes of Chuju, Mikoto, Yagiya and Zaizan, this kind of statement was looking down on them. Therefore, the 4 competitive girls immediately shouted in unison. Don't bullshit. Just bring us there. Chapter 1952. The pitch-black night dyed the green forest a pitch-black color, making the atmosphere extremely oppressive and tense. In an empty space in the forest, a group of people were surrounding a person who was half kneeling on the ground, panting. His face was very pale and he was holding a luxurious staff in his hand. If one looked closely, one would see that in this group of people, other than a few, the rest were all people in their 20s or 30s. Their auras were abnormally messy and they were panting. It was clear that they had expended a lot of energy. In the middle of this group of people was a pale-faced young man in his 20s. His face was handsome, but there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. It seemed that he had been injured. As for why the young man who was being protected in the middle was injured, it was easy to tell from the angry glares of the people who were protecting him. There, a group of black-clothed people, twice as many as the people around the injured young man, were silently standing there. They were coldly looking at the injured young man, their eyes filled with killing intent. The leader of the group was an old man dressed in black. He was the only one who didn't hide his face and had his hands behind his back. You can't escape, Prince Kaya. The leading black-clothed old man said indifferently. How about you just obediently surrender? Hearing this, Kaya half kneeled on the ground. Even in this life-and-death situation, he still smiled brightly and said mockingly. Surrender without a fight? You mean that if I surrender you will let me go? The black-clothed old man was silent for a moment and then sighed. My words were inappropriate. This one sentence proved that the black-clothed old man was determined to kill Kaya. However, before the guards and followers around Kaya could get angry, the black-clothed old man changed the topic. If Prince Kaya is willing to sacrifice himself for others, then I can promise to let your guards and followers go. Hearing this, Kaya's eyes flashed and he hesitated. Prince Kaya, Don't fall into their trap. A guard shouted in grief and indignation. If you let us go, wait until we return to the capital. Report to His Majesty. His Majesty will definitely be enraged. These lowly branch family members will not be able to withstand His Majesty's fury. Therefore they will definitely silence us. Kaya laughed bitterly. As the Prince of the Fair Empire, he was also a strong candidate for the next emperor. How could Kaya not understand this logic? However, looking at the current situation, Kaya felt that there was no way for him to survive. If only he could save the lives of his subordinates and guards, who had risked their lives for him before he died. Wasn't that a good thing? It could only be said that although Kaya understood, he was still moved and felt a bit of hope towards the black-robed elder's words. Seems like Prince Kaya has chosen to bury these people with you. Seeing that bitter smile on Kaya's face, the black-robed old man could guess what he was thinking. He no longer feigned mercy or attacked with words. Instead, an aura much stronger than an ordinary Type 8 expert burst forth. Then I'll let you all die together. Saying this, the black-robed old man did not send his subordinates to attack. He directly leapt up, Dou Qi swirling around his body. His body shot out like lightning, turning into an afterimage. He extended a claw and viciously grabbed at Kaya's head. Those shriveled yet sharp claws continued to enlarge in Kaya's eyes. The surrounding guards and attendants' shouts of shock and anger also entered Kaya's ears. Seeing this attack that was absolutely capable of killing him, Kaya felt as if time had slowed down. The bitter smile on his face grew even more intense. In the God Spirit lands, Kaya had also successfully transformed. During this period of time, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds, fiercely rising by a large margin. If one were to use the system's evaluation to determine his level, Kaya was only in the early stages of the Type 8 and had just reached level 70. Now he was at least level 75 and had reached the intermediate stage of the Type 8. With Kaya's strength at the intermediate stage of the Type 8, if he went all out and used the Wind of Dissolution, that could negate all energy attacks, even if this black-robed old man was at the peak of the Type 8, Kaya could still exchange a few blows. But it was a pity that he had already exchanged a few blows with the black-robed old man. That was why Kaya was injured. Kaya's injuries weren't too serious and weren't enough to immobilize him. But it was to the extent that it affected his strength. With his current strength and injuries, Kaya couldn't possibly withstand this claw attack from the black-robed old man. At this moment, apart from closing his eyes and waiting for death, Kaya seemed to have no other choice. But it was a pity that the heavens seemed to have decreed that Kaya couldn't die at this moment. Chi. Kaya's guards and followers stared with bulging eyes at the deadly claw that was heading for Kaya's head. But just as they thought that Kaya was dead for sure, the sound of something flying through the sky suddenly rang out from the depths of the forest. A streak of light streaked across the sky like a meteor. It didn't take long for it to appear in the air 5 meters above the clearing. At the same time that a beautiful figure appeared, a soft whisper that seemed to have come from the heavens echoed. Aegis, Absolute Defense Circle. Along with the sound, a translucent barrier made of crystals suddenly emerged in front of Kaya, narrowly blocking the claw that was heading for Kaya's head. Clink. In an instant, a crisp collision sounded. The black-robed old man's claw seemed to have collided with a piece of incomparably sturdy steel. A huge rebounding force blasted him back. Bam! The black-robed old man staggered backward with a horrified expression. This sudden turn of events caused everyone present to be stunned. Kaya also stared blankly at the translucent crystal barrier that had saved his life. A moment later, he seemed to have thought of something, and a trace of wild joy and excitement appeared on his pale face. Kaya abruptly turned his head and looked in the direction where the sound of flying had come from. The others also reflexively looked in that direction. What entered their eyes was naturally a beautiful figure with pink wings on her back, looking like an angel. Who else could it be other than Ikaros? Looking at the beautiful figure floating in the air, the angel-like figure that he had dreamt of every night, Kaya, who was always laughing and joking in life and death situations, actually lost his composure. This was the first time he had lost his mind in such a dangerous situation. Not to mention Kaya, even the guards, attendants, black-robed men, and the black-robed old man, who was at the peak of the 8th rank, were momentarily stunned. Their hearts trembled violently at the sight of that beautiful figure. In the end, it was the older black-robed old man who snapped out of his daze in time. His pair of old eyes released a frightening, chilling glint. "Who are you?" Ikaros didn't pay any attention to the black-clothed elder's chilling question. Her dark red eyes rippled like sci-fi frames as she glanced at Ka. Only when she confirmed that Ka was only injured and not seriously injured did she turn her cold face away. Ikaros's disregard for Kaya and the black-robed old man undoubtedly made Kaya extremely disappointed. At the same time, the black-robed old man was enraged. The chilling glint in his eyes intensified. "Looks like little girls these days feel that their lives are too long." Powerful Dou Qi suddenly surged out of the black-clothed old man's body. It was like a hot flow that caused the air around the black-clothed old man to distort a couple of times. This caused the expressions of Kaya, his guards and followers to change. "If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for seeing something you shouldn't have." After saying that, the black-clothed old man didn't have any intention of going easy on Ikaros. Instead, he rushed towards Ikaros, who was floating 5 meters above the ground. With a swipe of his claw, even the air was torn apart. The sharp sound of the air being torn apart caused many people's hearts to skip a beat. "Be careful." Kaya ignored his injuries and struggled to get up. From what Kaya knew, Ikaros's strength was still the same as when she was in the Spalier World Academy. She was at the 8th rank but had yet to reach the peak of the 8th rank. It was impossible for her to be a match for the black-robed old man. As long as one wasn't at the peak of the 8th step against a peak of the 8th step powerhouse, if one didn't have enough trump cards such as the help of a gold armament, even if it was a peak of the 8th step powerhouse, in the end, they would still be defeated and die. This was something Kaya could not tolerate. However, in the next instant, Kaya discovered that he was wrong. Moreover, he was extremely wrong. Peak of the 8th rank? Merely an ant. Chapter 1953. Chi. Ikaros didn't show the slightest hint of fear in the face of that incomparably sharp claw that even a peak rank 8 warrior would have to be wary of. She leaned to the side and the sharp claw covered in hot Dou Qi brought along a sharp gust of wind as it brushed past her body by less than 5 centimeters. The black-clothed old man obviously didn't expect that his full-strength attack, which he used to end the battle as quickly as possible, would miss. He was clearly stunned for a moment before his eyes flashed with anger. His sharp claws moved and like 5 tiny daggers, they slashed towards Ikaros' face. Facing this attack, Ikaros remained expressionless. Instead, it was Ka who was furious. After all, if this attack landed, even if Ikaros' head didn't explode, her face would be disfigured. How could Ka, who saw Ikaros as a goddess, not be angry? Ikaros, on the other hand, was the only one who didn't seem to care. She raised her hand and an aegis the size of a bowl appeared and collided with the black-clad old man's claw. Clang! The black-clothed old man's claw kept rubbing against the surface of the aegis. It caused a sharp creaking sound that pierced one's eardrums. On the other hand, Ikaros waved her hand and deactivated the aegis. She turned around and the wings on her back flapped heavily on the black-clothed old man's body. Peng! Amidst the low muffled sound, the black-clothed old man let out a miserable cry, as if he had been hit by something heavy. The sound of bones breaking came from his body, and his figure flew backwards, smashing into the ground. Puchi! A mouthful of dark red blood spurted out from the black-clothed old man's mouth. Blood splattered all over the ground, but the black-clothed old man didn't care. He cried out with a face full of shock. "You're a rank 9 warrior?" Ka's guards and followers were overjoyed to see the black-clothed old man defeated in an instant. They were about to cheer when the black-clothed old man's words stunned them. "Rank 9 warrior? This girl is a rank 9 warrior? No way." It was unknown who said this in a hoarse voice. Everyone present, be it Ka's guards, followers or the black-clothed men brought by the black-clothed old man, didn't pay any attention to it. It wasn't that they didn't want to pay attention to it, but the words rank 9 warrior occupied their minds. They didn't have the energy to think about anything else. Rank 9. Ka stared blankly at Ikaros. Her eyes had turned crimson. Her usual pitiful temperament was gone, replaced by an incomparably cold aura. She hovered in the air for a long time, then exhaled. The light in his eyes dimmed. As a prince of the Fea Empire, Ka was humble and courteous, but there were times when he admired others. For example, Sylph, who had always suppressed him in the Spalier World Academy, was someone he admired greatly. There were times when he idolized others as well. For example, Ka's father, Emperor Wuxia of the Faya Empire, had always been Ka's idol. There were times when Ka admired someone. That was Ikaros, who was as beautiful as an angel. She had never felt inferior before. Ka broke through to rank 8 at the tender age of 20. Apart from Ailu Empire's Princess Sylph and Baruba Empire's Prince Jafar, he was the most talented person in the Faya Empire. Ka was a prince of the Faya Empire. Not only was he the biological son of Emperor Wuxia, he was also a strong candidate for the throne. He could be said to be above everyone else. In addition, Kaya himself was handsome and elegant, with an extraordinary air about him. He was the Prince Charming in the hearts of every young girl. He had the looks, the air and the air about him. His status, strength and talent were all above the rest. How could he possibly feel inferior? But now Ka really did feel inferior. Moreover, he was feeling inferior because of his sweetheart. For the first time in his life, Kaya felt like he wasn't worthy of this goddess of Silveria. He couldn't find a second person like her. Bang, 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 bang. At this moment, an incomparably chaotic muffled sound mixed with a series of screams resounded, waking up everyone who had fallen into a daze because of the words ninth stage expert. When everyone raised their eyes and looked towards the source of the sound, the scene that entered everyone's eyes caused everyone to be stunned once again. There was no other reason other than the group of men in black who wanted to assassinate Ka were all lying on the ground. No one knew if they were dead or alive. Beside each of the fallen men in black, there were young girls with the same face and expression. Even their height, figure were exactly the same. They held laser swords and heavy cannons in their hands. Looking at the fallen men in black, it wasn't hard to imagine what had just happened. Ikaros. Then Chuju, Mikoto, Yeguya and Zhou Xian appeared at the head of the group of Misaka sisters. They were so fast that even the rank 8 fighters didn't notice them. Originally, Hinajiku, who was the fastest among the girls, should be the first to arrive. But Yukiya and Yukiya are wind elves, and Mikoto is a lightning elemental user. Comparing speed, catching up to Ikaros shouldn't be difficult. However, the battle was already over by the time the group of girls appeared. This showed how little time it took for Ikaros to use Aegis to save Kaya and defeat the peak of the 8th-step black-clad old man. That's why, even though it's complicated to describe, the time between Ikaros' arrival and the appearance of the girls with the Misaka sisters can be counted in seconds. In that short amount of time, 1 peak rank 8, 10 peak rank 8, 100 peak rank 7, a total of 111 peak rank 8 fighters were completely subdued. This caused Kaya's subordinates and guards, who had just been in mortal danger because of these people, to be unable to react. The black-robed old man immediately roared out, "Let's go! Who the hell are you people?" Hearing this, the group of girls looked at each other, smiled and said in unison, "We are from the otherworldly capital." Otherworldly capital? What kind of faction is that? I've never heard of it before. Yeguya puffed out his chest and spoke with a proud expression. "My lord's name is Wu Yan." Wu Yan. As soon as these words came out, the entire place was filled with cries of surprise and surprise. There was no one in the Spalier world who didn't know Wu Yan. That's because he had 2 identities. Ailu Empire's princess, Sylph's fiancé, the youngest rank 9 fighter in history. These 2 identities were enough to make a person famous in the Spalier world. Even the old man in black robes narrowed his eyes. He slammed his palm on the ground and used the force to propel himself up into the sky. Alas, such a panicked choice had a tragic ending. The old man in black robes seemed to have forgotten that he couldn't go any higher than 5 meters above the ground. Bang! Ah! With a loud crash and a scream, the black-clothed old man was sent flying back as if he had hit a steel plate. He smashed into the ground again and his head tilted to one side. He had actually fainted. Everyone was silent as they watched this scene. A peak stage 8th order powerhouse. That's a fighter on the same level as the patriarchs of the 9 great houses. It was one thing for such a powerhouse to be defeated by a stage 9 powerhouse, but in the end he actually fell to such a state. If this matter were to spread out, the black-clothed old man's reputation would probably be in an extremely sorry state. Hinajiku, Mikoto, Yagiya, Yuhin and Ikaros flew down from the sky to Ka's side. They looked at the pale Ka and asked in a low voice, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I'm fine." Ka glanced at Ikaros. Ikaros's eyes had returned to their original indigo color. Ka's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but think of Wu Yan's figure. His expression turned gloomy, but he quickly regained his spirit and spoke in a serious tone. We can't stay here for long. I'm afraid there might be more pursuers behind us. Let's find a place to settle down first. The group of girls naturally had no objections and nodded in agreement. Chapter 1954. The night was still going on. Within the forest shrouded in darkness, the cries of birds, beasts, and insects could occasionally be heard, seemingly waking up the birds that were resting. From time to time, the fluttering of wings could be heard echoing through the forest. Everything seemed so peaceful and tranquil. In a corner of the dense forest at the bottom of a cliff, a pitch-black cave stood there. It was like an eye on the cliff, giving people goosebumps just by looking at it from afar. It was also like a mouth on the cliff, giving people the feeling that if they walked in, they would never be able to walk out again. Even so, at this moment in this pitch-black cave, a large group of people was waiting there. They were like mountain kings, guarding the entrance of the cave while walking around the cave. Even on the walkway outside the cave, there were people holding their weapons tightly. Their cold eyes swept the surroundings. With one look, one could tell that they were patrolling and guarding against something. At the bottom of the pitch-black cave, a bonfire slowly burned. Light smoke drifted up from within, following the direction of the airflow. Just as it was about to spread towards the cave entrance, it was absorbed by a small crystal the moment it floated up, disappearing into the air without even leaving behind a trace of a strange smell. This crystal was originally used to store water, air, food, and the like in case it was needed in an emergency. However, in order to prevent the smoke from drifting out of the cave and being discovered by the pursuers, the crystal was reduced to absorbing the smoke from the bonfire. It could not be said that it was a waste of materials, but it could be said that it was a good way to deal with the situation. Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Zhou Xian, and the rest of the girls sat around the bonfire. Ka, whose face had regained some color, was also sitting there. The Misaka sisters were all hiding outside, protecting everyone in the dark. Therefore, the ones who were actually patrolling, guarding, and stopping enemies were the Misaka sisters who were hiding around the cave, not Kaya's attendants and guards. The reason why they were hiding was because they wanted to save Kaya some face. After all, even if Kaya didn't mind being protected by a group of still wet behind the ears girls, those attendants of the peak of the 7th rank and guards of the 8th rank at the very least wouldn't mind. Such an arrangement was to give Kaya face. Of course, Ka was aware of this as well. His heart was filled with admiration and gratitude for the attentiveness of these girls. Of course, most of his attention was still on Ikaros. This much could be seen from the way Ka would occasionally turn his gaze to Ikaros. This action could be said to be completely subconscious on Ka's part. It was similar to how boys and girls who had just awakened to love would often unconsciously observe their sweetheart in class. But the more Ka did this, the more depressed he felt. The reason was simple. From start to finish, Ikaros just sat there, her blue eyes reflecting the light of the bonfire as if it was burning. Even though it was beautiful, the colors were dim and her expression unfocused. Obviously, Ikaros was in a daze, not noticing Ka at all. How could Ka not be disappointed? Ikaros didn't do this to hurt Ka or intentionally ignore him. It's just that whenever Wu Yan wasn't around, Ikaros would just sit there in a daze. Since she couldn't see the figure of her dreams all the time, she could only immerse herself in her memories and picture that figure in her heart over and over again. Of course, if Ka were to find out about this, it'd be even crueler than ignoring him. Other than Ikaros, the other girls also noticed Ka's actions. This made Hinajiku and Mikoto feel helpless, while Yukiya and Yukinori exchanged glances and started whispering to each other. Hey Xian. Yaguya glanced at Ka from the corner of his eye and whispered. Isn't this person a little weird? Gasp. Xian softly replied. Because this is the first time I've seen someone from this world. Maybe everyone in this world is like this. Is that so? Jejuya crossed his arms and tilted his head. He closed his eyes and pretended to be deep in thought. After a long time he finally spoke. I see everyone in this world is weird. Ka, who was paying attention to Ikaros, didn't hear the conversation, but Hinajiku and Mikoto did. They could only shake their heads in annoyance and break the deadlock. Prince Ka. Chuju was the first to speak. Can I ask you a question? Only then did Kaya come to his senses. His expression returned to normal as he nodded. If I know, I'll help you solve it. It's not that important. Hinajuku quickly waved her hand, hesitated for a moment and said. Actually, after we entered Faya Empire, we noticed that we couldn't fly more than 5 meters above the ground. Do you know why? So that's the problem. Kaya suddenly understood and then smiled. Miss Chuju, there's no need to worry. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just something we used to deal with the demonic beast army. Something to deal with the demonic beast army? Hinajuku, Mikoto, Yugia and Zhou Xian perked up. Even Ikaros turned to look at him. Ka puffed out his chest and nodded. I'm sure everyone knows that there are many flying beasts in the demonic beast army, right? Ka sighed. Due to the existence of these flying beasts, we're at a huge disadvantage when we use the capital as our base to fight them. They can ignore the defense of the city walls and they can also increase their altitude to make our attacks miss. It's hard to even detect them. Plus, flying has many advantages in battle. There are many hidden threats. We want to get rid of these threats. At this point, Hinajuku and Mikoto had a pretty good idea of what was going on. To deal with these flying beasts, the Faya royal family must have used some method to turn the skies of Faya Empire into a forbidden zone. They must have eliminated the flying beast's huge advantage. The ancestor of the Faya Empire's royal family, the god who created the Faya Empire, Faya, once had the title of God of the Wind. Therefore, the people of the Faya Empire's royal family are very good at practicing and using wind magic or wind-related techniques and combat skills. As expected, Ka explained with a light smile. When our Faya ancestor was still alive, he carved 77 magical formations on the borders of Faya Empire. These formations alone don't have much of an effect. But if all of them are activated by injecting magical energy, they can create a forbidden zone. Due to the flying beasts being troublesome, my father remembered reading about this in an ancient book of the royal family. He had the idea of using it to restrict the flying beast. At this point, Ka's tone was filled with admiration for Wei's wisdom. Then it turned into helplessness. This time I left the royal city under my father's orders to activate these 77 anti-flight magic circles at the border of the kingdom. Who knew that it would lead to an assassination attempt from the collateral family? Are these people really going to disregard the Faya Empire that is in danger just for the throne? Chuju and Mikoto shut their mouths. Let's not talk about the fact that this is someone else's family matter. Even if they like to poke their nose into other people's business, they can't do anything about it. Just the fact that the other party didn't care about the safety of the country and did something like this already made Hinajuku and Mikoto feel disgusted. Naturally, they didn't want to continue this topic. However, your ancestor sure is arrogant. Yaguya snorted and turned his head away in dissatisfaction. You dare to call yourself God of the Wind in front of us hurricane witches and fairies of Bocce? Is this a provocation? Zhou Xian nodded in agreement with Yaguya's words. It was obvious that she didn't like the title of God of the Wind. But that was to be expected. After all, these sisters were wind elves and were very competitive. It wasn't strange for them to behave like this. Kaya, on the other hand, wasn't going to take this seriously. Then Prince Ka, you should have other methods to travel, right? Mikoto changed the topic and asked. Otherwise, it would take a lot of time to travel around Faya Empire's borders. Of course I do. Kaya suddenly laughed. If you don't mind, why don't you follow Ka to the capital? Only then did the group of girls smile in satisfaction. R1152. Chapter 1955. As time passed, the night approached dawn step by step. The moonlight spilling from the horizon moved along with the rising moon, bringing about an indescribable tranquility. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be willing to break this tranquility. Below the cliff and in front of the cave, the guards and attendants of the Faya Empire's princes were still vigilant. They didn't slack off at all as they dutifully patrolled inside and outside the cave. They just wanted to give their masters a moment of peace. Not long after, a wave of footsteps suddenly reverberated from within the cave, causing the expressions of those who were on alert and patrolling to turn stern. The Dou Qi and magic power within their bodies were instantly mobilized and slowly activated. However, when everyone present turned their gazes to the location of the footsteps and saw the scene there, the slowly rising Dou Qi and magic force directly stagnated in everyone's body and gradually shrank back. The owner of the footsteps was a young lady. A young lady with pink wings on her back. The young lady walked out of the cave as though there was no one around. Her indigo pupils flickered in an extraordinary splendor like the starlight. Her delicate, beautiful face displayed an adorable and delicate expression, vividly displaying the pitiful temperament of the angelic young lady, attracting everyone's attention. Gazing at the angelic young lady, the attendants and guards were absent-minded. It was as though they couldn't associate this delicate young lady with the incomparably cold figure of the 9th stage powerhouse who defeated a peak 8th stage powerhouse not long ago. In an instant they were at a loss. The angelic young lady continued to walk to the empty space in front of the cave. She lifted her head and gazed at the moon in the sky. The pink wings on her back gradually extended. Whoosh! A chilly wind blew past, causing the leaves to flutter in the air. It swept past the angel-like girl's delicate body. Her pink feathers fluttered in the wind. They intertwined with the leaves and hovered around the young lady. In the night sky, the moonlight seemed to have been summoned and sprinkled onto the young lady's devastatingly beautiful face. The young lady's indigo pupils were even more dazzling. Incomparably deep. Moreover, the angelic young lady gazed at the moon as though praying to the night sky. At this moment, no one could compare to her beauty. At this moment, no matter if it was patrolling, guarding, protecting the prince, the 9th stage powerhouse, or the attack of the magical beasts, everything disappeared from the minds of the people who witnessed this scene. Even their breaths held in an instant, leaving the surroundings in an abnormally silent state. Everyone could only stare blankly at the angelic girl under the moon who was so beautiful that she didn't seem to belong to the mortal world. They were unable to return to their senses for a long time. If nothing unexpected happened, this scene would become an unforgettable scene in the hearts of those who were fortunate enough to witness this beautiful scene. Every time they fell asleep, it would appear in their dreams. After who knew how much time had passed, another set of footsteps sounded from within the cave, startling the group of people who had been mesmerized for who knew how long. By the time they reacted and looked towards the cave, Kaya's figure had entered everyone's field of vision. The group of attendants and guards was just about to salute when Kaya raised his hand and stopped them. His eyes didn't turn to look at the people around him, but instead at the young lady who was standing there, spreading her wings and whispering something to the moon. His gaze wavered a few times, but in the end he couldn't restrain himself and a trace of love emerged. But at the same time, a trace of panic appeared in Kaya's eyes. It wasn't that Kaya was making a fuss over nothing. Rather, this scene was just too beautiful, so beautiful that the angelic young lady seemed as though she could fly to the moon at any moment and be summoned back by the heavens that should belong to her. Although this thought was too laughable, Kaya couldn't help but panic. Unable to restrain himself, he walked forward but didn't reach the young lady's side. Instead, he stopped not far behind her. This wasn't of Kaya's own volition, his footsteps came to a natural stop. The distance between Kaya and the young lady seemed to be hinting at something, forming an invisible barrier that blocked Kaya's path. Miss Ikaros. Kaya fell silent for a moment before uttering a sentence that didn't hurt or itch. Why aren't you sleeping? Ikaros didn't seem to realize someone was approaching until now. She turned around, her indigo eyes staring straight at Kaya. Kaya felt like he could be sucked in at any moment, unable to extricate himself. He couldn't help but tilt his head away. Ikaros didn't understand why Kaya suddenly turned his head away. But that's that. Given Ikaros' simple-minded emotional circuitry, she couldn't understand anything. She could only answer Kaya's question honestly. I don't need to sleep. You don't need to sleep? This caused Kaya to be startled and puzzled. What do you mean? Ikaros lowered her head slightly. The expression on her face from beginning to end was one that made people feel pity for her. I don't have the ability to sleep. Of course, Kaya didn't understand what she was saying. Originally, he wanted to probe into the secrets of his goddess, but when he saw Ikaros's heartbreaking expression, he couldn't bring himself to ask. All he could do was silently curse himself for being like this. After all, Ka had always been a gentleman, his emotions rarely fluctuating. But not only did Ikaros' every move affect Ka's emotions, every time she did, Ka's status would drop by a notch. One can only say that everything has its vanquisher. In the end, Kaya could only interpret it as Ikaros cultivating some sort of special technique. Even though it gave her strength that he couldn't catch up to, it came at the price of not being able to sleep. It's not uncommon to have techniques or magic that require a certain price to cultivate. The more benefits there are, the more drawbacks there are as well. It's no wonder Kaya thought of this. Whenever he thought about how Ikaros was sighing at the sky alone in the middle of the night while he was sleeping soundly, Kaja couldn't help but feel a little upset. He couldn't help but ask, "Then does Miss Ikaros feel lonely?" Kaya regretted it as soon as he asked. Asking a girl if she's lonely in the middle of the night? Isn't this too frivolous? But Ikaros pondered seriously for a moment and was at a loss for what to do. When Master isn't around, my energy furnace becomes weird. Is this reaction called loneliness? A question mark almost floated above Ka's head. Obviously he was confused by Ikaros' words. However, Ka understood the gist of it. Kaya knew this so-called master was how Ikaros addressed Wu Yen. Kaya didn't know what that meant, but according to Ikaros' translation, once Wu Yen isn't around, Ikaros will feel lonely. This made Kaya's heart ache a little, but for the first time he looked directly at Ikaros and asked in a serious tone, "Do you love Wu Yen?" Love? Ikaros froze. Ripples appeared in her indigo eyes. She pressed a hand to her chest and after a moment of silence she spoke. Her voice was as soft as a warm breeze, slowly spreading to the surroundings. Master said, when you're happy, you're happier than yourself. When you're sad, you're sadder than yourself. When you're happy, you're happier than yourself. When you're in pain 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times more pain than yourself. That means that person loves you. Kaya tried to put himself in her shoes and couldn't help but nod. But Ikaros' next sentence froze him in place. If this is what love is, Ikaros said with a voice so soft that it could disappear at any moment, but her voice was firm and firm. Then I should be in love with Master. Kaya's body shuddered and he lowered his head, his expression unreadable. After a while he looked back up with a bitter expression. Is that so? In the next moment Kaya turned around. As he walked towards the cave, he said those words with an indescribable tone. I wish you happiness. Watching Ka's back slowly disappear into the distance, Ikaros was a little confused. She lifted her head to look at the night sky, lost in her thoughts of her lover. Chapter 1956. The next morning, when the sunlight poured down, dyeing the entire forest a golden yellow, in front of a cave in a corner of the forest, Kaya and a group of attendants and guards were standing there as if they had been waiting for a long time. They were chatting and laughing in low voices. Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya, Yushin and the other girls walked out of the cave, causing the lively forest to quiet down for a moment. Almost at the same time, silhouettes appeared from the nearby forest and landed behind the group of girls, neatly lining up. These people were naturally the Misaka sisters who had been secretly protecting everyone present. Ka's entourage and guards couldn't help but look curiously at the Misaka sisters. When they saw Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yakuya and Yushin, their gazes turned into respect. Yesterday Ikaros defeated the peak rank 8 old man in black. Chuju and Mikoto were famous people in the Spalier World Academy. For Yakuya and Yushin to be able to stand with them, there must be something special about them. Under such circumstances and thinking, even though the group of girls was ridiculously young, they were still young. In fact, amongst the attendants and guards present, there wasn't a single person younger than them. But power was power. The girls' reputation had long since surpassed that of everyone present, and they were now second only to Kaya. Aside from the Misaka sisters, a group of girls passed through the crowd and came to the front. They exchanged glances with Ka and nodded to each other. Ka even flashed a smile, not at all losing his composure like yesterday when he was talking to Ikaros. Mikoto went straight to the point. Then, how are we going to get to the capital? Do we need to prepare anything? Ladies, don't worry. Ka smiled. He raised his head and looked at the blue sky in the distance, attracting the attention of everyone present. Everything that needs to be prepared has been prepared. As soon as Ka's voice fell in the sky, a huge black shadow suddenly appeared. A huge shadow. Inspiring. It's an airship. The airship's massive shadow flitted through the air like a plane about to land as it glided in this direction. It slowly lowered its altitude and landed on the empty ground. Finally, under the girls' surprise, it stopped in front of the empty ground amidst a cloud of dust. Airship. Ikaros remained expressionless as she stared at the giant airship in front of her. This was the first time Ikaros had seen an airship, but Hinajuku and Mikoto had a look of surprise in their eyes. Didn't they say the sky above 5 meters is a forbidden zone? Why is there an airship that can fly? There are only 3 airships that can fly in the skies of Faya Empire. Ka seemed to have predicted the girl's reaction and explained. These 3 airships are engraved with magic circles that Father painstakingly found from books. They are immune to the effects of the forbidden airspace domain. Last night I used the communication crystal to contact Father, and Father sent this airship over. It will bring us back to the Faya Empire's capital city. Only then did Hinajiku and Mikoto nod in relief. Get over there. At this time Kaya's entourage and guards also brought a group of men in black with shackles on their hands. The one leading them was the old man who tried to assassinate Kaya last night but was killed by Ikaros in one move. The old man in black had wanted to vent his anger on the guards and attendants who were pushing him around, but when he saw Ikaros standing in the middle of the group of girls beside Kaya, the anger on his old face disappeared and turned into a look of fear. He didn't even dare to look at Ikaros. Obviously, the old man was traumatized by Ikaros' attack. However, the old man was still quite strong-willed in front of Prince Ka. Prince Ka, I may not be of Faya Empire's royal bloodline, but I am still a member of the royal family. What is the meaning of this? After saying that, the black-clothed old man raised his hand and showed the shackles to Kaya. His intention was very clear. He wanted Kaya to remove his shackles. These aren't ordinary shackles. They're special tools that can seal the flow of dochi and mana. Otherwise, Ka wouldn't be able to let a peak rank 8 who tried to assassinate him last night travel with him. Upon hearing the black-clothed old man's words, the expressions of the guards and attendants turned terrifyingly grim. They were filled with rage. Assassinating a prince is a serious crime. In the Spalier world, there's no such thing as 9 familial exterminations, but a man is responsible for his own actions. Since the old man tried to assassinate Ka, it's only natural that he'd be executed when he returns. Now he's actually objecting to being restrained after the failed assassination. He's only allowed to kill and not allow others to shackle him. No matter how arrogant he is, there has to be a limit, right? A member of Faya Empire's royal family? Prince Kaya didn't retaliate against the black-clothed elder's shamelessness. He only said with a smile that wasn't a smile, I hope you'll still dare to say the same in front of my father. The old man's expression changed. The old man is indeed a member of Faya Empire's royal family. He's also a member of the branch family who tried to usurp the throne. This assassination attempt had already failed. It would have been fine if they had died, but since they had been captured alive, Weiyu would definitely think of a way to pry open the mouths of the black-clothed old man and the black-clothed men when they returned, forcing them to reveal the mastermind behind the scenes. If the old man really dares to say he's a member of Faya Empire's royal family, then wouldn't he be indirectly admitting that the person who ordered him to assassinate Ka is a branch family member of Faya Empire's royal family? Navia's rage will definitely cause the entire branch family to suffer a thunderous blow. Thus, the black-clothed old man immediately shut his mouth. Ka glanced at the old man and didn't ask any more questions. He waved his hand. Bring them up. Yes. The group of attendants and guards immediately pressed down on the black-clothed old man and the black-clothed man, cursing as they chased them onto the airship. It was as if they were venting their anger for nearly losing their lives at the hands of the black-clothed men last night. Ka shook his head and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at the girls. Everyone, let's go up. Chiju, Mikoto, Ikaros, Yukino, and the girls nodded. They looked at each other and leaped up. Their bodies turned into streaks of light and flew towards the deck of the airship. In the next moment they appeared on the deck of the airship. The Misaka sisters followed suit and all of them leaped up. While making sure they weren't more than 5 meters above the ground, they flew up one after another. It didn't take long for the deck of the airship to be filled with people. Kaya's attendants, guards, and black-clothed men glanced at each other, regretting that they hadn't done so earlier. Even Kaya was stunned. He couldn't help but laugh, and with a flash he stood up and stood at the head of the deck. Let's go. Ka looked straight ahead. To Faya Empire's royal city. V-room. As soon as Ka's voice fell, the enormous airship trembled. The engine started up and a magical circle appeared behind it. Like a propeller, the airship spewed out a violent shockwave and slowly rose into the air. As the airship rose into the air, the forest below became smaller and smaller. After a while, the entire forest was within the view of the group standing on the deck of the airship. Under the azure sky, The huge floating airship rotated and determined a direction. The magic array behind it also rotated and sped off in a certain direction. Seeing the forest that took them 2 days to walk through disappear from their sight in an instant, the girls heaved a sigh of relief. Ikaros and Yukino stretched their backs and enjoyed the breeze. The smell of the sky is still better. Hinajuku, Mikoto and Hinajuku smiled faintly, and together with Ikaros, they looked towards the direction of the airship, their eyes flashing with determination. In Faya Empire's royal city, what awaited the girls was a battle against a pseudo-demigod. Although they couldn't say that they had to lose this battle, in order to reduce the pressure on Wu Yan in the future, the girls made up their minds. They must defeat the pseudo-demigod Beast King. Chapter 1957. Whoosh. A sharp sound pierced through the air. A gigantic creature shuttled through the air, leaving a trail of clouds behind it as it flew into the distance at a shocking speed. Watching the scenery around them recede at an extremely fast speed, Yigaya and Zhou Xian leaned over the railing of the airship deck, leisurely enjoying the breeze as they gestured at the scenery around them. It seemed as though they were in the middle of a daily conversation. Chuju and Mikoto were amused and envious of the Bawu sisters' intimate actions that were comparable to a couple's. Sometimes they would quarrel with each other, sometimes they would play with each other, and sometimes they would glare at each other angrily. Chuju and Mikoto had heard a little about the Bawu sisters from Wu Yan. Naturally, they knew that not only were the twin sisters once split from the same body, but they also knew that the Bawu sisters fought each other for the sake of the fate of only one of them surviving. However, the meaning of this fight was incomparable to the meaning of ordinary fights. If it were another two people, they would know that sooner or later the two of them would merge into one. If only one of them could survive, they would definitely try their best to kill the other for their own survival. But when it came to the Bawu sisters, this pair of sisters fought each other for the sake of the other, sacrificing themselves for the other to survive. The Bawu sisters became Wu Yan's summons not long ago and followed Wu Yan to the Spalier world. As soon as they arrived in the Spalier world, the Bawu sisters entered the diluted magical lake to transform. After the transformation, a series of events happened. The girls didn't even have time to greet them and hurriedly prepared to head to the three empires to deal with the Beast King. So at first, for the Bawu sisters who met and interacted with each other for the first time, Chuju and Mikoto weren't familiar with each other. But after hearing about this matter, whether it was Chuju, Mikoto or the other girls, even Ikaros, they had a whole new level of respect for the Bawu sisters. They were filled with enthusiasm. They just met each other. They had just joined the team. The reason why Chuju, Mikoto and Ikaros were able to get familiar with the Bawu sisters in just 2 to 3 days. Therefore, the Bawu sisters were very close to each other and couldn't do without each other. Sometimes they would fight, sometimes they would quarrel, but in the next second they would become close again. Hinajuku and Mikoto were very envious, but they also knew that this was a relationship that no one could imitate. Of course, even though they didn't have a special sisterly relationship like the Bawu sisters, Chuju, Mikoto, and the other girls all saw each other as their own sisters, even if they weren't related by blood. It's just that Mikoto seems to be a blood-related sister, right? Moreover, there were 20,000 of them. Chuju's gaze inadvertently swept over the main seat of the airship deck. She saw Kaya standing there in a daze, gazing into the distance. After a moment of silence, she turned back to Ikaros. Ikaros, please take care of Yakuya and Zhou Xian, don't let them run around. Ikaros tilted her head. She didn't seem to understand the meaning of this sentence, but she still nodded and agreed. Mikoto. Chuju grabbed Mikoto's hand and walked towards Kaya. Come with me to find Kaya. Mikoto was surprised at first, but then she seemed to have guessed Chuju's intentions. She nodded and followed behind Kaya. Prince Kaya. Ka, who seemed to be thinking about something, calmed down when he saw Hinajuku and Mikoto walking over. He discreetly glanced at Ikaros's position, indirectly explaining what he was thinking about just now. Then he revealed a graceful smile. Chuju-san, Mikoto-san, is there something you need? Chuju and Mikoto nodded. We'd like to ask you about the situation in Fades' capital. Mikoto's brown eyes turned serious. Kaya, what's the situation between Fades' capital and the demons? Hearing Hinajuku and Mikoto bring this up, Kaya was a little surprised, as if he was hesitating whether he should explain it or not. But when he thought of Ikaros's strength that could very well reach the Ninth Order, he changed his mind. The 12 elders of the council are all Tier 9 combatants, and they're the ones in charge of the 3 great clans and royalty of the 3 great empires. In other words, in the 3 great empires, other than the 3 guardian deities, the emperor of the royal family and the elders of the 3 great clans are the strongest combatants an empire can muster. And there were only 4 of them in a single empire. Now Ikaros has displayed power that could very well be a Tier 9 combatant. Chuju and Mikoto were once famous fighters in the Spalier World Academy. Even Kaya couldn't tell how strong Ikaros and Zhou Xian are. Clearly they're going to be a huge help. In addition to the Misaka sisters who took care of 100 peak Tier 7 combatants in an instant last night, Kaya felt that he had to get this power to help Fady Empire. Kaya nodded and spoke. Before I left the city, the demons of the demons had already come into contact with Fady Empire's defensive barrier. Although they didn't break through, my father felt that if this continued, the barrier would eventually be destroyed. That's why he sent me out to activate the forbidden airspace domain to eliminate the threat of the flying demons. Currently, other than the battle prowess of level 9, both the Faya Empire and the Magical Beasts Army have sent level 8 fighters into battle several times. I believe that in the near future even level 9 fighters and level 9 magical beasts will have no choice but to join the battle. At this point Kaya sighed. Fortunately, Fady Empire's guardian deity and the demons of the demons are still behind the scenes and haven't made a move yet. Otherwise, when the demigod combatants fight, the victor would be the one to decide victory. As long as one side's demigod combatant wins, then there's no need to continue fighting. Because if one side doesn't have a demigod combatant, even if the side with a demigod combatant doesn't send out a single soldier, just the strength of a demigod combatant alone can wipe out an army no matter how big it is. Unless the other side has 100 Tier 9 combatants, but that's just a pipe dream. That's why Kaya said this. Hinajuku and Mikoto were both surprised and speechless at the same time. According to Kaya's words, Fady Empire doesn't seem to know that their guardian deity is in the capital of a different era and can't leave. Fady Empire is the side without a demigod combatant and could be wiped out at any time. Perhaps Fady Empire's Emperor Wuxia already knows that their guardian deity isn't in the capital but didn't say it out loud to prevent despair. The demons of the demons of the demons also don't know about this, so they haven't made a move yet. In other words, Fady Empire could be wiped out at any time. With that in mind, Hinajuku and Mikoto exchanged glances and decided not to mention it for the time being. At the very least, they couldn't mention it in front of everyone or it would cause panic and anger. Perhaps the attendants, guards, and even Kaya would be hostile towards them. So Chuju changed the topic. Then, did your father say what he plans to do next? Now the flying demons are no longer of any use. The demons of the demons have been greatly weakened. Father said that if the situation is optimistic, he will take the initiative to attack. Kaya puffed out his chest as if he was proud. As long as the demons of the demons are eradicated, even if the demons are still around, they won't be able to attack Fady Empire without soldiers. With the guardian deity there, the demons won't be stupid enough to challenge us directly. Then it will be Fady Empire's victory. Hearing this, Chuju and Mikoto couldn't help but admire Kaya. With the demons of the demons attacking Fady Empire, Wuxia would definitely discuss it with the guardian deity. Thus, Wuxia must have realized that the guardian deity isn't around. And in the absence of the guardian deity, Fady Empire could be wiped out at any time. Yet Wuxia was still willing to take such a risk and take the initiative to eradicate the demons of the demons. If Wuxia could really eradicate the demons of the demons before the demons make a move, then the guardian deity would really be able to intimidate the demons. Without the demons of the demons wouldn't recklessly attack Fady Empire. In this way, Fady Empire would be able to win this war without the guardian deity. Provided that the demons don't make a move before the demons of the demons are destroyed. While everyone was preoccupied with their own thoughts, the Fey Empire's royal city appeared in everyone's line of sight.